morning. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I want to report out on our closed session this morning. So pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Personnel Matter, Conference with Labor Negotiator Judy Hawkins, Debbie County Administrative Officer, Human Resources and Risk Management, Deputy Sheriff Association, DSA, Sheriff's Management Unit, SMU, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association, CCPSEA, and Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Negotiations Human Resources Director, Board Action. And there's nothing to report out. So, at this time, if you don't mind, I'd like to have a moment of silence for our Sheriff Kuntz, please. Thank you. So I have a little change this morning, if you don't mind. Instead of starting off with public comment, we have a presentation by our FEMA folks here. And the reason I want to do this is because I think that the public comment will be more interesting after we see the FEMA presentation. And after the presentation, we'll go into public comments, and from there, we'll follow our agenda.
I just wanted to clarify are you referring to, because the presentation by FEMA is under item 2, so you're opening item number 2 for the brief presentation, closing item 2, having the general public comment, and then reopening item 2
Right.
for the presentations and the public comment specific to item 2, including this presentation, will be at that later time.
Right. That clarifies it right there. So, so again, on this presentation that we're going to get here, since it's on the agenda, then that's when we'll be able to make public comments on it once it comes up on the agenda. Okay? We're doing this because these folks have to head out to the Valley Fire and do the same thing, and they're on a very short time schedule. So, thank you.
Thank you.
You want to introduce yourselves?
Yes, I will. My name is Dennis McEwen. I'm at FEMA. I'm with the Joint Field Office in Sacramento, supporting this fire, the Calaveras County and Lake County for the fire scores.
Mr. Sheriff, can we have you use the microphone
Yeah,
for
I'm sorry.
television
Yeah, if
recording?
you want to stand, you could like stand at the podium.
There we go.
Stand up mic. We have options here.
All righty. Yes, my name's Dennis McEwen. I'm with FEMA, and we're at the Joint Field Office in Sacramento supporting Calaveras County for the county, for the fires. We've established a clearinghouse, basically, where we're collecting the various data, scientific analysis that's been done relative to the watershed impacts and the debris flow potentials that might be experienced in this post-fire environment. It's really basically a clearinghouse where we've brought together some of the analysis that's been done primarily from the U.S. Geological Survey, and we've provided map layers that show this threat. Also provided layers with infrastructure damage impacts, residential structures that were destroyed, and different data layers so it can help the operators, the staff level folks make decisions relative to the disaster recovery, including specifically the manufactured housing unit or this temporary transitional housing that FEMA is supporting in coordination with the state for Calaveras County. So basically that's what we've done. We have a clearinghouse that's available. There's a public website for the information to be available to the community and provide that support. In support of this effort, we have Julia Grimm from the National Resource Conservation Service. She's a geologist. She's one of our subject matter experts supporting this effort. And she's prepared a presentation that will speak specifically to the debris flow threat and what that might mean and how that could be characterized and how that could inform some of the decisions, specifically siting of these units in the county. So with that, I turn it over to Julia.
Thank you. And I guess there may be a reason to stick close to the computer, at least on the first few slides. So if this works and the microphone is on, I'll start here. Thanks. And yeah, it's thank you for your time and letting us kind of describe kind of some of the tools that we all have in our tool bag, thanks to the scientists at U.S. Geological Survey, or USGS, to help characterize this debris flow hazard. I know in other emergencies, maybe not so much in the uplands, the hazards are always very clear. You're either in the flood zone or you're not. It's a yes or no thing. But the debris flow hazard, the state of the science is such that there are a couple of interim steps that need to be decided. And just going to go ahead and describe that tool and empower all of us, and in particular the decision makers, about those interim steps that will lead to on-the-ground decisions and get this thing moving, I think. So anyway, thanks also for accommodating the schedule. Lake County is also in the midst of a lot, and I think we're all in for a very busy year. So if you oh, look at that, the YouTube video showed right up. For those who, this is just a 30-second video taken from Colorado in 2003 of what a debris flow looks like. It's not just your standard flood. There's so much power to these. It's not, they can move the boulders. These flood flows get so chock full of sediment that in itself becomes energy that is known to kill people and want to stay out of harm's way. So there's the video. There we go. So as you all, many of you know and have experienced, these debris flows, the situation with the wildfire, it strips off all that vegetation, right? The canopy is gone, the underlying brush, the roots are damaged. So all that loose soil that is accumulated over probably decades is stored up on those hill slopes. Wipe that away, the sediment is starting to come down, but you've also changed the characteristics of the soil for wildfire. It literally bakes the soil so that those waxy substances in the burned, incinerated vegetation is driven down into the soil as vapor and literally coats the grains. So you might as well have put wax paper on that slope. They're called hydrophobic soils. Hates the water. So instead of infiltrating, that water just runs off. And that adds to that debris flow hazard, that much more water to mobilize the sediment. So this is just an example from Southern California, very well versed in debris flows and the state of the science. Much of the state of this science has developed out of Southern California experiences. But that loose sediment, okay, be away from the microphone, just creates this dry rabble, just pouring into the stream channels, just waiting for that one rainfall event. And it doesn't take much to mobilize that sediment and have it come down through the stream channels where it can do damage. And of course, nobody wants this to happen. Debris flows just coming in with enough power to just bash through walls and do inflict quite a bit of damage. So the challenge in the science of risk assessment, it would be so nice if it was black and white. You're protected or you're not. No, unfortunately, hazard risk assessment is necessarily probabilistic. Choices has to be made, and it's all based on, well, how much chance do I want to take? How conservative is the approach? Or are we going to hedge our bet? It's like buying insurance, right? And even the state of the science acknowledges that probability. It says there are areas of greater risk and there are areas of less risk. So that's as far as the science will meet decision makers on the bridge. And then they say, okay, this is what we have. The risk tolerance of the decision makers becomes an integral part of the process. How much risk are decision makers willing to take? So that's the purpose of the meeting. And we've shown this to different groups up here, to the point where it's culminating here in today's meeting, where the reason we're up here, it's originally intended to specifically to help decision makers locate, identify areas where the debris flow risk is unacceptably high, that none of these these housing units, manufactured housing units, should be placed within that zone of unacceptably high risk. But then who makes the decision? Well, the way it's set up is it's to empower local decision makers who know the landscape, who know the climate, and are willing to make that decision. This is the risk that we are willing to go with. And so and hopefully this tool that we're going to present today kind of arms everyone with better decisions that are scientifically based. So this is just a quick listing. I was part of the CAL FIRE team on the Valley Fire in Lake County. And honestly, I have not even been to the Butte Fire, so I'm certainly not one, even as a geologist, to stand up here and advise as a situation that meets the needs up here. But we did have, as part of our Phase 1 team, and I know the Phase 1 team down here utilized these same tools, including this first one, those burn severity maps. FEMA maps become a good decision-making tool to help the teams, when they're on the reconnaissance, determine, well, is there a risk to life or property at this particular location? And if so, do we think it's low, medium, or high? So we used all these tools, including that last on that list, the debris flow hazard assessment, again by USGS. And that's going to be the rest of the focus on today's presentation, just to explain this one particular tool. USGS was very responsive. They've been working on this science of debris flow prediction and risk assessment for decades, putting out equivalent reports for Southern California fires, I know, ones in Colorado and throughout the western United States. And as they've been doing that, they have been collecting data and refining their model as they go. All their model is an empirical model. It's based on what they have observed and documented, and then measured using the magic of GIS, looking at maps. How big are these basins or the watershed areas that are the source of the runoff and the sediment that leads to channels and directs down as a debris flow? So they were very quick. Within a couple of days, when the Phase 1 teams were up there, we got their results of the preliminary debris flow hazard assessment for both these fires. And all of it is public information posted on a web page, and there's the web link down there at the bottom of this slide. The image there, and I know there's a lot of detail, I'm not going to go into the detail, that's just what the web page looks like when you first call it up. And again, I'm going to step away from the mic, hopefully you hear me. But basically it just shows the fire perimeter, and it's already showing some of that information about what their results were for that debris flow hazard assessment. you see almost a patchwork of colors here showing these drainage basins. And based on their empirical data, USGS was already starting to characterize the probability. What's the likelihood of a debris flow occurring in any one of these main drainage basins? Generally, the the black dots generally identify the stream channels. We'll zoom in, so you don't have to feel uncomfortable about being. Thank you very much. Please look here. There you go. Stay close to Mike, right? Okay. So I will zoom in. So I wanted to get you somewhat oriented and no surprises if you called up this web page. All the data that supports the images in this web page are also available for download for those versed in GIS and your staff's GIS specialists to upload and evaluate, toggle on and off to help with the decision making. What they happen to show on their web page is associated with the 25-year event. That's a recurrence interval. Basically, it's with I think it was a 4% chance in any given year that rainfall amount will occur. But the data also extends much farther. It includes the 2-year rainfall event, which is a smaller event. That's like 50% chance in any given year, right, of that size storm will occur. All the way down through a 5-year, a 10-year, 25, 50, and up to 100-year. Only a 1% chance that rainfall event will occur in any given year. That would be a very highly conservative option if you're going to assume that size of a rainstorm. So that's what you're looking at on the web page. But let's zoom in a little bit. Oh, no, we're going to hold off on the zooming in for a moment. But to explain, the legend on that last image showed probabilities, right? There's a high probability that some basins were going to have a debris flow associated with that 25-year event, and others were going to have one, and so on. That's just one piece of the USGS total model. And there are actually, I'd say, 2 primary models that got combined into a combined debris flow hazard. The first model shows up on that first web page. It's the probability that a debris flow will occur. Again, we're thinking probabilistically, right? They can't put their finger on it and say, absolutely yes, absolutely no. They broke it up into 5 categories, everything from less than 20% chance that a debris flow will occur in that basin, that watershed area, all the way up to 20 to 40 and so on, up to more than 80% chance that a debris flow could issue from this basin with that amount of rainfall, that 25-year rainfall. So they went ahead and ran their empirical model, come up with probability, ranked them 1 through 5, simple ranking, acknowledging the limitations of the state of the science. It can only go so far. They combined it with a second equation, an empirical equation to estimate the volume of material. Now we think in terms of cubic yards. USGS reports it metric, so that's cubic meters. But generally, their equation, they categorized it into 4 categories or ranks of volume, all the way from less than 1,000 cubic meters to more than 100,000 cubic meters of material. Again, so less risk all the way up to greater risk when it comes to volume of material that could be unleashed. And there's a certain logic you can already see. A larger basin has more area from which the sediment and the rainfall can collect, so it's probably going to generate a higher volume than a smaller basin.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I got a question on the basin volume.
Yes.
So is that the volume of like the watershed or the river, the creek basin that it's in overall without, just a normal, that's how much water they could collect theoretically, or, how do they measure that?
No, that's a very good question. Generally, these basin volume estimates derive from an empirical equation to estimate, and I'll read the text down here. It's kind of, you didn't copy well, but it's the predicted volume in cubic meters of a debris flow. The bulked up combination of water, sediment, and some of that coarser debris. logs and that sort of thing, the boulders, that in combination represent a given volume of a debris flow. Did that answer your question? It represents, if you remember the YouTube video,
Right, so,
That
like give me an example, you know, like what would the size of a, like, so the 1,000, that'd be a small creek that was burned over. Is that, you know?
yeah, for example, you're saying, okay, where would I expect that smaller
Right,
volume
is
to
it
occur?
Colorado River, you know, basin, is that the 100,000, or is it, I mean, what's the?
Yeah, and when we zoom into the fire area, you'll start to see that pattern that we saw at a very small scale of yellow basin. You can use the GIS data to show that, but yeah, 1,000 cubic meters, I wish I had the conversions in my head. Engineers are much better at that than I am, to say how many cubic yards that represents. It's not necessarily a lot, and typically, and I'm sure it was reflected in the USGS model, that the basin size is shows a strong relationship to the volume that is estimated.
Okay.
So that's going to be probably the smaller drainages in some areas that feed into the larger tributary channels, the McCollum and the.
So would the McCollum be something like the 100,000 potential, or 10 to 100,000, or, I mean?
It's, you'll see, no, even the 100,000 cubic meters, all these basins, which are the source areas, that this is how much contributes to the amount of the volume of debris in a given stream channel, is not basin scale.
Okay.
And again, once you study the map a little, and I might be able to better answer that question by showing graphically. Here is a drainage area. One point I was going to bring up, because of the way the science is and how the computer interprets it, you will see that the basins that are delineated as a part of this process are relatively small, because of and it documents their observation that debris flows don't issue from really, really large basins. Typically, they issue from the smaller side basins
Okay.
that come in and then get into a main channel and are transported a limited distance downstream. So to say the McCollum River Basin has a debris flow hazard, if observations to date suggest that's not the dynamics. These are smaller drainages.
Thanks, that helps clarify.
Okay, great. Thanks for your patience figuring that out. So here, ranked 1 through 4, just as basin probability was ranked 1 through 5. So we have kind of two parts to a debris flow hazard. We have the likelihood, maybe a high likelihood that a debris flow is going to happen, or low, combined with the volume. Small volumes, not so risky. Larger volumes, definitely more at stake. Literally, USGS combined the ranks 1 through 5 for probability with the ranks for volume 1 through 4 to come up with a combined hazard that takes into account, in a very general way, that probability and that volume to generate a combined hazard. Now, when you look at the data, you will be able to actually, your GIS folks will be able to toggle on and off. I want to look just at volume. I just want to look at probability. But the combined hazard assessment takes into account both, and both are critical components to define that hazard. So you have all that data available, but to start to move in the direction of accepting, I'm going to go with the combined hazard here to capture both of those. That almost becomes a decision unto itself to use the science properly. So this should look very familiar. This is just the same fire perimeter with those basin hazards, the combined debris flow hazard for each of these basins. They may not show up really well from where all are sitting, but the USGS carved out all these drainage areas and to run the calculations, and then assigned in orange the moderate hazards, and in yellow the low hazards. For, in this case, this is the probably the 25-year recurrence. And the colors will change depending on the size of the storm event that you're running these calculations through. So these are the basins that create that kind of stained glass window effect of low yellow, moderate orange, and high debris flow hazard from the basins. But more critically, remember that YouTube video, those debris flows? The debris flows occur in the channels. The hazard is associated with proximity to the channels. How close are you to the channel where a debris flow could come barreling down towards homes, and businesses, and roads, and culverts? So there's a second component to the USGS model called the stream segment component. And as a decision maker, stream segments and the results that show up on their database get more to the heart of where the debris flow hazard is. The basins describe the source area. Where is the sediment coming from? It helps them characterize the volume, but it's the stream channels. That's where the hazard is. So I would say, you almost start to toggle off that basin. And if you want to get to the heart of the matter, start looking at these stream segments. So the legend here describes the low segments. It looks more like a spider's nest if you could focus in better, or a network of lines. It's not a solid color yellow. So where the yellow segments represent low combined debris flow hazard, up through moderate, which is in the orange, and then the red is the high debris flow hazard there. I'll get more into blue as we zoom in. That's kind of a separate segment that looks into those larger drainages where debris flows indeed are still a recognized hazard. So the key is, look at the stream segments. That's where the debris flows occur. So FEMA, as part of the clearinghouse that Dennis and the team are putting together right now, has downloaded this information into their clearinghouse website. For those who've been to previous presentations, note the web page is a little cleaner on this version. Easier to read and document. But both links will get you there, what shows up on earlier presentations and on this one. So, again, this is the Interagency Watershed Clearinghouse, and both the Valley Fire, the Butte Fire up here, and this is the web page. When you first get to this web page, this is what shows up. Just that small scale view of the both fire areas. You can go in and set your background if you don't want the aerial photo, which isn't always useful in forest and terrain anyway. Choose that. And of course, zoom in and choose your layers up here. So we're going to zoom in using the FEMA Clearinghouse website. So I've already zoomed in. I've set my background here. I always like to see landscape and topography. So here's the fire perimeter area. Then you can go up to the layers and start to toggle on and off those layers. In this case, what I did and captured as a screen print, the combined debris flow hazard for the basins only for the 100-year event. That amount of rainfall, that represents a pretty high amount of rainfall, that 1% chance. And for the entire fire perimeter, this is what it starts to look like. And we're going to zoom in right in here. There is one basin in particular that was assigned a high combined debris flow hazard risk within the fire area, but a lot of moderate, if you notice. That's the lighter color purple. So we just zoomed into this area. If you recall, here's that high hazard for the 100-year event, the combined debris flow hazard, probability, and volume. And now that you're zoomed in this far, you can see the channel, those stream segments, the channels where the debris flows occur, of relative risk, of probability and volume. And you'll notice the red, which represents high combined risk, is indeed associated with the basin where all that material is derived from, and it comes down to some main channel that flows down through here, the main drainage. And then, the rest of the the combined hazards for the stream channel segments also show with moderate as orange, and a low combined risk in the green. So you're going at it, and it's really easy to do, especially when things are rushed and this is urgent situation, and you're going, well, gee, this area along the main channel, no risk, right? It's not in a purple area, it's not next to a drainage channel that shows up on the model. That's a limitation of the model itself. And that's that blue line that showed up on that smaller scale view, where USGS researchers, because of the limitations of their model, could only model the smaller drainages on either side of the bigger drainages, of the McCollumies, or the larger drainages here. But they go, we recognize there is a debris flow hazard. Some of this sediment from the debris flow could get into the main channel and be transported down. That too is a hazard. But it's a different science. The state of the science isn't quite as well developed. So what they did was they added a layer to their geodatabase, to their GIS data set that recognized that these tributary watch streams, shown in blue, there is a recognized debris flow and flood hazard associated with these. They can't quantify it quite as much. It's the same blue line for a 2-year event or a 100-year event. It will just show up, and it's a larger stream, so probably a wider area might be involved where the risk is. But they can't tighten it for you in terms of low, moderate, high risks or volumes. It's just that is recognized. So both those show up on the USGS geodatabase and have been included in the FEMA clearinghouse site as well. Notice we're still talking 100-year here. The 2-year event has also been added to the FEMA clearinghouse data set, and those intermediate recurrence intervals have not yet been added to that clearinghouse site, but they are certainly publicly available. So that's the model. It's pretty straightforward. But it does represent the state of science. And USGS, certainly in my view, working with them over the decades, has I certainly have high regard for the state of the science, and they're always on it. The researchers will be out there this coming season, making more measurements, documenting, observing, always looking to refine the model. So the next big question is, throwing it from the ology side of all this to decision-making time. So what? How can decision makers use the results of this assessment to make those decisions as science-based as we can? Take advantage of the state of the science as it exists now to make decisions. And they're tough decisions. Remember, the probabilistic side of all this is, again, we're going to go back to risk tolerance. But this debris, the output from this USGS assessment, the results of it, offer some flexibility in terms of a risk-based decision-making process, recognizing decision makers' own risk tolerance. Where does the model where can you toggle on and off inputs to create maybe more conservative scenarios all the way down to less conservative scenarios? The first place is choosing the storm event recurrence. You want to pick the smaller 2-year event, the one that's going to happen 50% chance any given year, all the way up to the 100-year, 1% chance in any given year you might get that kind of rainfall. Those are the record breakers in the books. Everybody remembers, what was it, 97 up here, 97, 98, big years. But I'm not ready to assign a recurrence to that, so I probably shouldn't have ventured in that direction. But they're the big storms. There's flexibility there. Pick a storm recurrence event. Now, as a result of that, once you choose the recurrence interval, the size storm you want to design for, that's when you bring in the USGS debris flow assessment. If you use the combined hazard, that particular map is going to show low, medium, and high combined debris flow risk assessment for that recurrence. It's also, remember that watch stream, those blue lines that are, just acknowledge there is a debris flow hazard along those larger trunk streams. So now, migrating this information over to Google Earth, so you're looking obliquely up this high-risk basin that was identified and the channel segment associated with that, that USGS says high. We think there's a pretty high combined debris flow risk associated with this drainage. And for those of you who can see it, there's that red line marking that particular stream channel segment associated with that high risk. Now, some of the trunk streams shown in yellow and some of these side tributaries are moderate risk. And you could, if you studied back and forth between this base map or this reference map and the Google Earth view, you could relate this drainage to this moderate hazard drainage and what it looks like on the landscape. You're starting to get honed in and seeing those locations. And then with the main, again, that watch stream, the main channel here passing through. So that's for the 100-year event, combined debris flow hazard. The next one is going to look very similar, but it's going to be for the 2-year event. So watch this red segment and watch this moderate debris flow hazard segment as you move to the 2-year. For a 2-year, it's just listen to me, there is a moderate debris flow hazard risk associated with that 2-year rainfall. And you get an increase, what was moderate for the 100-year up in these drainages is now considered a low risk for that amount of rainfall. Less rainfall, correspondingly lower risk. So great data to work with, but you can already see the differences. And you sign that design flow, and you're already starting to kind of gauge higher risk, lower risk. So you carried it to these steps by considering the storm event, the results of the USGS model. The next step that is, okay, we understand that the debris flows occur in the channels. So the closer you are to the channels, the greater the risk. The farther away from those stream channels, the less the risk. So again, where decision makers have some flexibility is, what's your setback? How far on either side of the channel should decision makers draw a line and say within this zone, that represents an unacceptable risk to the community and to the constituents. And we just have to make a decision that that's going to guide things like a placement of these temporary housing units and building permits and those sort of decisions that are confronted by the county. So these are very arbitrarily proffered. It's just an example. What if you did just a 10-foot setback? Just take that stream line, that channel bottom, go 10 feet on either side, or do you want to go 100 feet, 500 feet? And what does that mean? What does that look like on the landscape? There's some GIS can do this too, and I'll show some examples of what that represents on the landscape. So by combining these, okay, now this is a qualification. Every good ology presentation has qualifications on the state of the science. The setback that's offered, it's not totally a desk exercise. You can get to some point with the magic of GIS, but at some point someone needs to know the landscape. What's the shape of that channel? A setback in a narrow V-shaped channel is going to look a lot different from a main channel with a broad floodplain and gentler slopes on the side. Also, what does it state? What is close to the channel and distances? The decision is a technical one, and it's challenging and it's risk-based. For those where there's any question, field checks are always appropriate to double check, even qualitatively. Obviously, this is a good site. Obviously, this is a bad site. There will be outliers if the group decides to go with the setback way of thinking of things that need to be checked in the field and run through a different process. But it's a good start, and hopefully, the goal is with that, the GIS and the results of the debris flow, you can carve out portions of the landscape where it is clear, there is consensus. The debris flow risk in these areas, outside these setback zones, everyone can agree on is acceptably low. Get moving on those sites. And let the program roll forward while you deal with the more problematic sites. So, based on these moving through that matrix of kind of a process-based approach to risk-based decision, ultimately you might come up with some scenarios to consider. So, for example, you might go with a less conservative scenario where the group size, we're just going to go with a 2-year event here. We think, that lower rainfall amount, we're comfortable with that. And they might lump all the debris flow risks the USGS output has and say 10 feet on either side of the stream. We're comfortable with that. That represents our risk tolerance. That might be one scenario, risk level 1 scenario. Or at the other extreme, you might go more conservative. Let's go, oh no, we want to consider the 100-year. Come on, El Nino's coming. We know there might be more storms or whatever the decision makers kind of agree to. And then it's always possible to take advantage, more fully advantage of the USGS modeling to recognize that maybe low, maybe even medium debris flow risk gives us room, latitude to assign a smaller setback. But yet we want to acknowledge the high risk or the watch streams. Really, we need to keep those setbacks more conservative. And then assign, another risk-based scenario. So you come up with these series of scenarios that then decision makers have worked through the science and evaluate that risk tolerance and make a call for what scenario best suits the local needs. So here are some examples of what those setbacks might look. These are the 100-year results. USGS, they just show up as fine lines, not always clear, but again, there's that red, that high debris flow hazard basin showing up. First, we just overlaid a 10-foot setback, and here's what it looks like. Very narrow ribbons associated with the channels. Increase the buffer width, just a couple of GIS button pushes, and this is what 100 feet on either side looks like in terms of where that zone might, where it fits on the landscape. And go to almost, a much more conservative estimate of, okay, we want to go set back 250 feet, 500 foot total buffer width on either side of that channel where we just don't feel comfortable moving forward with decisions that are in that zone. So go from less conservative, intermediate to more conservative. Just scenarios, again, totally conceptual, these do not represent recommendations by any stretch. Just to give you a sense of what it looks like. And actually someone who understands landscape can look at those and go, oh, that's way off, or that's way too narrow. And Google Earth is a great tool to do that. So now I just went from, there was the 100, not going to do that. The last one was the 100-year. This is just the 2-year. It almost looks exactly the same. It's just that the color of those segments. What used to be a red high hazard debris flow segment now drops to a moderate debris flow hazard. So those are the options that decisions have, that decision makers have to kind of flex through the results of this USGS hazard assessment. So now we revisit the purpose of this whole briefing and these meetings is to get closer to the answer of so what. Here's a decision-making tool. Here's where the flexibility is. Here are the limitations of the model. It can only carry you so far. At some point, we revisit. What is the county's acceptable risk for the placement of these manufactured housing units and other decisions that are on their way in the wake of this devastating fire? And here are some of the, the options for flexibility. And certainly keep the door open. You'll hear a lot more ologists. Maybe there are other considerations that haven't been broached, or other ologists have a different idea. I wanted to keep that open as well. So, we haven't flushed this totally out. The county has this GIS layer. What shows here is it was initiated by CAL FIRE, and I guess the county took it on and did some revisions and cleaning up of the data, where each one of these red dots, if you zoomed in, it's a little house structure, showing the locations of the destroyed structures. So that would be, that might be yet another tool where you have the USGS results. Now you come at it from the other end. Well, if we choose this buffer, or if we go this approach, all you have to do is add that layer with these destroyed houses to understand, here are the implications. And I can see how that could weigh in as far as helping decision makers settle in on the one risk-based scenario that they're comfortable with, so the program can get moving. That's it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Is it possible to get a copy of that for our county webpage, for Butte Fire webpage?
Absolutely, yeah. Forward it on.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to move into public comment. Please don't comment on this particular subject until we get to the subject, which is on our agenda. Also, I'd like to mention that Brian Moss is sitting in for Shirley, because Shirley's away this week. And so Brian is our acting CAO for today, so he's assistant CAO normally. Public comments. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the consent agenda. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued at the conclusion of the regular agenda in order to provide an opportunity for a remainder of comments to be heard. Now, in this little disclosure that I just read, the board opted to go to the regular agenda first and the consent agenda last, starting our next regular board meeting. So these will have to be turned around. Okay, so public comments.
Morning, board members. My name is Jay Rohn. That's spelled R-O-H-N. I'm from Angels Camp, and as many of you probably know, there's a movement in Northern California called the State of Jefferson, which is proposing a state split from many counties in Northern California from California. I'm not here to actually discuss it, but actually only to extend a cordial invitation to all of you and anybody that's interested to a town hall meeting on Tuesday, November 17th at 6 p.m. at the Italian Picnic Grounds in Sutter Creek. That meeting will be attended by a spokesman, Mark Baird, who is one of the most knowledgeable people about this movement from Northern California, and he will be speaking about this movement as well as answering your questions. It's sort of in its infancy in Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne counties, but I'm sensing that there's a pretty good deal of interest in finding out about it. So it might be helpful if you are all able to attend that meeting. If not, we're planning and don't yet have a date for another town hall in Murphy's sometime in late November or early December, and I will inform you guys of that when the date is set. So I have here just some flyers I'd like to give your secretary and hope you all can attend. Thank you very much.
I am Deborah Mullen from Public Works, Calaveras Transit, and this is
Jeannie Hayward from the Resource Connection Food Bank.
And we're here to talk about the Stuff the Bus events. And hopefully this is something that you will be able to attend and maybe even volunteer at. This is Calaveras Transit support for the Resource Connection Food Bank. As you know, always does incredible work and lately has stepped up off the charts with their work. But this effort is to help ensure that all Calaveras County families have nice holiday meals this year. The local grocery stores give us space in their parking lots to park a Calaveras Transit bus and for us all to crowd around their entrance and talk to the shoppers as they go in and ask them to purchase items to help stuff the bus and benefit the food bank. The stores are Save Mart in Angels Camp, Treats General Store here in San Andreas, Sierra Hills Market in Murphy's, and Marvell Food Store in Valley Springs. The events are going to take place for the next 3 Saturdays from 10 to 3. The Calaveras Transit drivers volunteer their time at these events, and many of us do as well. So anybody wants to volunteer? Supervisor Edson, what day?
So not this Saturday, coming up, next Saturday?
The 14th, okay.
Yeah. So I'll do treats from, say, 10 to noon, and then Marvell from noon to 3.
Oh, on the 14th, it's Save Mart and Marvell.
Okay. Yeah, Marvell.
Okay.
And then treats, I can come this Saturday
Great.
from, say,
Perfect.
for a couple hours.
And you might want to mention to the supervisor that it really is fun.
Yeah,
Get
I mean,
to
I've done
talk
it.
to the people. And
I've
people
done
are
it for the past, 3 or 4 years, and I've had a blast every single time. It's really actually fun.
So I just want to give you guys an update also about Santa's Express. Obviously, we're a little bit behind. I don't know why, maybe. I have a few other things going on. But the plan is this year to serve about 1,200 families. That's an increase over last year, knowing that there may be families that have been affected by the fire this year that need help more than ever. We are looking at December 21st as our distribution day for toys. We have the Marines Toys for Tots have partnered with us this year. Pat Garahan has headed that up, and he is mobilizing to get toys as well. Know that in the past, this Santa's Express has been an income qualified event so that we look at serving the low income. This year we're making an exception that if you've lost your home, regardless if it was a rent or owned, there's no income qualifiers for those folks, and we want to make sure you all are able to tell constituents that they can come in and sign up, because we do want to serve those folks as well. So we're very excited. We're getting ready. We're going to march into Santa's Express time. These 3 Saturdays are so important to get volunteers out. It really makes a difference if we have a lot of volunteers in the community. So if you know of any community groups that might be interested in joining us, 4-H or church groups or whatever, please help us solicit families to come. It's a fun day. So thank you very much, and we appreciate your support.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I have some flyers for you. I emailed them. I'll leave some up here. And then I have if it's all right, I'm going to make one more transit-related announcement, and that is that the Delta Gold Line, our intercity service to Stockton, is going to begin on December 1st. That's a Tuesday. We'll have a soft opening and be followed later on by a grand opening with maybe quite a bit of hoopla. But I have schedules, and I will email those to the board, post them, and a little bit excited about that. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Tom Sullivan. I'm representing Abbott's Fast Fire today, as I am on the Board of Directors. Item number, I think it was changed, wasn't it, to item number 4 on the agenda, the Auditor Controller.
Yeah, we can't talk about that.
Can't
during
talk
public
about any of it.
comments.
Like, you may not, can I make a statement about it? No?
Mr. Hamilton, when that agenda item comes up,
Oh, well, wait
then
till.
we'll be able to
Okay,
speak to that
thank
issue.
you.
Tom Sullivan, I'm sorry.
Mr. Sullivan.
Gotta get Tom.
Okay, any other public comments? Yeah.
Good morning, Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. Since no one else is going to be taking your time, I thought I would, to continue my impromptu history of the Mother Lode. I know I talked previously how Calaveras is known as the land of skulls, the land of death. When Calaveras first incorporated back at the 1800s, it was the Wild Wild West. And the people that had displaced the Indians on Double Springs Road, Double Springs community, were white men. And they took it upon themselves to take a stand against the revelry and the murders that were occurring all over Calaveras County, and they set themselves up as the first courthouse. They had a courthouse, they had a jail, and they had a hanging tree. They had a lot of hanging trees. They decided they were going to start a little bit of law and order in the Mother Lode, and they existed for about a year until those thieving scoundrels from Moke Hill come over to the hill, took our archives, and run off with them. We got over it pretty quick. Today we're pretty grateful because otherwise y'all would be carrying on over at our nice quiet community over there, but we're glad you're over here. When I first moved to Calaveras in 1974, there were still some of the old-timers living there. We had Bessie and Everett Parrish that lived right next door to me. He was a prisoner of war during the World War I. He was held captive by the Germans. On the other side of me was Boyd Davis. He had been in World War II and had been fighting the Japanese and was real strong, one of the most decorated veterans in Calaveras County when he passed away. And of course, up the road we had the Hunts, Sadie Hunt, in the old Double Springs Ranch. She had been born on Double Springs and died on Double Springs. Before the turn of the century, she watched the Indians come back to her property and try to camp out in the areas that they once called their meeting place. Because as you know, Double Springs isn't called Double Springs because there's two springs. It's called Double Springs because that's where the teams had to double up to get their equipment up to the camps in the gold mining. So I know there's a lot of history on Double Springs. My property, my main property, is the old hotel. Next door to me is the old general store. Across the street from that is the old livery stable, and directly across the street from me is the old Wells Fargo stop. So when I moved there, I started digging around on the property, and I've been digging around for 40 years, and I started finding artifacts. And so once again, I have props. And when I started digging up these artifacts, I started asking around, where did these things come from? How old are they? Who made them? This last weekend, I was able to meet with a gentleman in South Lake Tahoe that lives right behind the asphalt plant, which is another story I'll talk to you about. And he took out his little spyglass and he looked at these and he says, this is not machine made, this is handmade, and I couldn't tell you how long it's been around. My figure in it is that it's either thousands of years old and is made by Indians, or perhaps behind my hotel, where I live, there might have been Chinese servants that left these on my property. Anyway, whenever I find something like this, and I find all kinds of things, including square nails and old hinges and burnt bed springs from the fires, I'm reminded that I'm not the first person on this property. There have been people on this property for centuries, maybe thousands of years. And my response to that is, when we talk about property rights, we really don't have rights to property because we can't take it with us. We need to talk about property responsibility, how we can maintain what we have for people in the future, like we have been coming after, that will be coming after us. Thank you for your time. More later.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Any other public comments? Okay, we'll move on to our regular agenda. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment. Yeah. Where is it? Oh, yeah. I'm not used to doing it this way. So we'll just move straight on to the regular agenda. So the administrative office, board chair, and department heads update on Butte fire recovery.
I would like to ask the team to come up and do your recommendation presentation. Thank you.
Hold on a second while we set up the next little presentation.
Certainly did. Bunch of them.
Good morning, Peter Maurer, Planning Director. I got roped into being the spokesperson for this group. We're here because FEMA has requested, you might say demanded, that the county establish a risk threshold for the placement of their manufactured housing units, MHUs, on properties that were damaged by the fire. It's with some hesitation and maybe even trepidation that we make a recommendation to you. We don't really have the resources available to come up with a scientifically based analysis. I say with some frustration because FEMA has all the resources of USGS and all the other agencies of the federal government, yet they have punted to us to make that determination. So with that in mind, we have a short PowerPoint that sort of goes over some of the highlights of what we saw earlier to sort of focus our attention back on what you are willing, we as a county are willing to establish as a threshold for the placement of the FEMA modular units. So again, this is for their placement of their units, and we are to establish where those are to be. Next slide. So again, what's the likelihood that there would be a flood or debris flow that would occur in any given location this winter? Something to keep in mind is that the level of risk will diminish over time. This year will be our worst year as plants reestablish, the area recovers slowly. The risk of flooding and debris flow will diminish over time. Typically, it's in a range of about 3 to 5 years that the risk is at its greatest. After 5 years, the possibility of debris flow is reduced to the point where we're sort of more or less under normal circumstances. But this first year, obviously, is going to be the highest potential risk. Everything is essentially sterilized. It's hydrophobic, as Julia pointed out. There is a high degree of risk this year dropping off as time goes on. There are multiple variables, as Julia pointed out. Depends on the slope, depends on the narrowness of the canyon, depends on the size of the basin, depends on what type of soil, rock structure, the depth of soil. All those kinds of factors go into making a determination of how risky is it to place a structure at any location. Every site is unique, and you really can't extrapolate from a qualitative type of analysis, which is what they did on the 70,000 acres of burned area into is it good here or is it better over there? So we don't really have the basis to make a scientific determination that it's good here, 20 feet further away it's safe, without looking at each individual site. And again, the basic risk factors that we're looking at are the debris flow hazard determination and the storm event. How much rain are we expecting this year? We know that there is an El Nino forming out there. Whether it hits us as hard as it hits Southern California, anyone's guess. But I think we have to take into consideration that the likelihood of severe rains is probably as high as any other year, potentially higher because of the El Nino developing. So we have a series of maps here that show sort of simplified form of the fire perimeter and the different debris flow hazard assessments based on various storm recurrence. This is the worst case scenario, the 100-year flood. The yellow is the low area, the orange is moderate, and there's that one little drainage basin that Julia pointed out, which is red, which is the high hazard. The 50-year, not a whole lot different. It's moderates shrunk down a little bit more low. Go to the 25. Again, very little change from that. And then the 2, this is 10, I'm sorry. Again, reduced risk because of the potential for the torrential downpour from the higher level storm hazard. So we're now at a point of what is the acceptable risk? What is it that we want to accept? And our recommendation is that we don't try to come up with some arbitrary lineal dimension away from a stream. We don't believe that there is a scientific basis to establish that. It's a wild guess. You can come up with some generalized numbers, but they're really arbitrary. So our recommendation is that we use the 100-year recurrence interval storm, the low-risk debris flow, and if there is a location that is potentially suitable, it's within those areas, a site-specific analysis from a qualified specialist, an engineering geologist or someone like that, can make the determinant based on the site-specific criteria that the USGS and FEMA had identified as what's really necessary. Every site is different. So that's our recommendation. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I have a question. Peter, about how many sites are you estimating? Any idea?
Well, again, these are for the placement of the FEMA trailers. We believe that the maximum amount is going to be somewhere in the range of 25 to 50 of those trailers. I think we have 3 or 4 applications pending right now that are waiting for immediate placement.
Sure, but I think Debbie was probably trying to ask, in these areas, how many?
I don't know.
You know, I would just say real quickly, I'm sorry, Cliff, that this is not unsimilar to drilling wells in this county, or siting on-site wastewater treatment systems. Because of the geology and the topography of this county that we're very unique, and there is no one-size-fits-all. You saw FEMA do a presentation that really brushed the burn with one broad brush. And then, of course, there's that one site that Peter brought up again in his presentation that is certainly on the 100-year is a high probability. But it's very difficult to enumerate or put a scientific factor in place that we can stand on. And again, it's based upon geology and topography of the county. So just reinforcing what Peter was stating.
Any other comments, guys? Questions? Okay. Next. Is that it? That's the whole presentation right there? Is that like the 5-minute version or what?
I'll add a few things, if I may. Is this on?
Yeah.
Choosing a 100-year recurrence interval storm is the most conservative choice of storm events, the least likely to occur, essentially a 1% chance this year. Choosing the low risk of debris flow is, again, the most conservative choice. But then we mitigate that with a recommendation for site-specific analysis for all other sites, which gives us both a requirement to put together the specifics of how to approve site-specific requirements on specific locations, as well as adds time, a little bit of time in terms of the review when we're approving these locations, these site locations. So specifically concerning these temporary housing units, this recommendation takes the most conservative approach possible, yet also allows for the deployment of a quick method of mitigating. So for an example, if someone comes to us with a location near the top of a watershed, we know that that portion of land will not be contributing a lot of debris, and therefore it's a much safer location. It's a little more problematic when you look at access to that site and how does that site connect to existing utilities such as public power or well water or septic. But at least it gives us the ability to identify those places that are obviously out of harm's way. We can send those through fairly quickly.
So one of the things that I heard also is the decision we make here is going to affect the permit process in the future. Are we still on that, or is that backed off?
First of all, I'd like to make sure that we stay on track for the FEMA part of this. What we're going to deal with in the future is unknown, because the probability of new construction will most likely develop after the rainy season, which will change some of the issues that we're going to deal with, because we will be able to recognize how big of a problem we're having during the rain events, which is typically during the construction activity, slows way down or falls off during the winter months. So using time as our best part of this evaluation is to watch for the construction of new homes, permanent homes, which would be anticipated to be most active after the rainy part of the year. And hopefully the recovery of the land will be more significant to lower the risk hazards as time goes by. So this is a real dynamic situation. I don't know what the last couple inches of rain did out there, but we have no reason to think that we won't have a pretty active rain year, and that's what we're hedging our speculation on, is how to be prepared for what we're going to hopefully not have any more problems.
Jeff, did we have issues this last rain here?
Issues in the events that occurred Sunday and Monday and even last night. I haven't had any reports this morning, which I think is good news. We did take debris flows. We did plug up a number of culverts. These areas were focused on Jesus Maria Road, Hoover, near that intersection coming down from 26, some locations on Whiskey Slide, and of course localized flooding on almost, I wouldn't say localized flooding, I would say localized small debris flows that overtop the surface of the roadway, but doesn't stop the passage of vehicles. That can be quickly cleaned out. We were able to stay up with it because we have rented a piece of equipment that's in process of being purchased that was approved in the current budget for a Vector truck, which is like a truck-mounted vacuum cleaner that sucks debris out of a culvert. Works very well, and it speeds up our process of being able to clean the culverts so they can receive new storm flows. So we got away with this particular event. And I don't mean that it's good in that it did not cause any major flooding that we know of. It did not cause any major debris flows that we know of. It didn't cause any subsequent damage that we currently know of. Now, of course, my focus is on on public roads, not on private lands. I don't know what's happened on private lands. I'm sure there's a lot of evidence of what's called rill, that would be R-I-L-L, rill erosion, which is the beginning of debris flows. And I anticipate that as we get more and more into this winter, we will see larger and larger events with higher and higher intensities. This event was great because it was low intensity over a long period of time. We couldn't ask for a better rain for a post-fire event.
Okay. Questions from the board? Public comments?
I really appreciate that this is just for the FEMA trailers issue. Wonderful. But also, in the long run, first of all, I think this takes a tremendous amount of time from Peter to do the general plan. Is there anybody thinking about how all this, we can isolate this one little square? I said, hey, you got to deal with it. But it will affect minor details like the general plan. And I haven't heard anything from the fishing game, Army Corps of Engineers. Because if we try to do anything with those little creeks, that's going to change paths. In the past, they did come in and cause a little problems here and there. So I just wonder when that's going to be looked at. Because everybody has a little turf and they all want that pint of blood out of this misfortune. And we can look forward to, if nothing else, we can take a look down in Arizona, big flooding problem. Down by LA, we're having some big flooding problem. And we can just say, hey, this is going to be the worst. Hopefully, God, this is the worst. I haven't heard anything. What is the plans for all that polluting material that's being washed downward? Nobody said anything about that yet. How's that success going? Because of all the no vegetation up there, the water is going to cut its own path. And it's taking down all the pollutant and dangerous chemicals. Is anybody keeping track of it? Is there some, could this also affect the FEMA trailers, the wells, the drinking water? Is there any thoughts about that, or just strictly, hey, we want to make sure the FEMA trailers go back to its previous owners in good shape? I mean, I could say something about FEMA from previous experience. It's not going to be complimentary, but let's make sure that if we just focus on one item, it's great. And I want to compliment and thank them, all the great minds that's sitting at the table. But it's going to have side effects that correlate with everything else we're doing in this county. If we just look at one little item and ignore everything else around it, we're going to have to redo everything else again, all over again. So I want to thank them. I think they're doing a great job. But it's not just one little item. I haven't heard anything from Fish and Game. What they're going to do about it if we start messing with the creeks? Army Corps of Engineers, they don't want nothing to do with this? Is that going to be out of their jurisdiction? So it would be nice to know how they feel about it. Thank you.
Good morning, Rosemary Wilson from McCullamy Hill. I realize that the placement of movable temporary trailer is different from building a secure property on a foundation, a regular house. I'm just wondering, though, in the previous weeks, a lot of people have been waiting for the site to be cleaned up. And I've sort of thought that after the site had been cleared up, we'd be ready, if we wanted to undergo the start on the rebuilding. But now I'm hearing that there's a lot of concern about the placement of a temporary structure. Are we going to face difficulties that we haven't even thought of yet in terms of rebuilding a permanent structure? Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comments? Okay, Jeff?
When we get around to the individual department reports after we deal with this item, many of the questions that the public has brought up can be addressed. And just because they haven't heard specifically about it, it's probably a failure on our part to communicate clearly what has been going on in the background.
Yeah, so this is just a report on the presentation that we had earlier, a report out, and I'm still not clear on what the question is because that hasn't been presented really.
If I may, Supervisor Edson.
So FEMA's requested that the board establish a threshold that we are willing to accept, the risk level for the placement of their units. That's a specific request that is before you.
Just their units?
Just their units.
What is the risk? I mean, obviously, human life that we're concerned with, but if one of their trailers gets damaged and it gets billed back to the county, I'm trying to figure out why they're assessing liability to us.
I think the real risk is to human life. If someone's sleeping in a unit and a debris flow comes down and takes it out, there could be possibly death. And we certainly do not want that to happen. There are obviously property costs associated with, the loss of a unit. But the real issue is, the life and safety.
Is that confirmed with FEMA, Mr. Mauer?
That's my
We have
understanding.
FEMA representatives sitting right in the back of the audience here. Can we ask them?
That's
Certainly.
Good morning, Supervisors. Fred Wernberg, Division Supervisor for FEMA in Calaveras County. Mr. Mauer is correct. Our request for this determination is based on the potential for injury or threats to the people who might be occupying the manufactured housing units. And, the federal government is very sensitive to the sovereignty of states and local jurisdictions. And typically we find, rightfully so, I think, that local jurisdictions and the states for that matter would not want the federal government making decisions on their behalf, especially decisions that would affect the life of their citizens. So that is why FEMA has requested that the county identify what that criteria may be for the placement of these mobile homes.
Thank you, Supervisor.
okay. Questions?
So, Director Mauer, we're being asked to give you guidance, the group guidance on the level of risk assessment that we're willing to take.
Yes.
This is a board poll question, right? Not a vote.
Well, the agenda allows for possible action, so we would want an action taken by the board to accept one level of risk or another. I don't know if you want us to put the maps back up to show some of the different criteria that we looked at.
Also might be good to go to the last page, the staff recommendation, so then we know what we're...
So the recommendation that we're going to 100-year recurrence interval storm with the low risk of debris flow. And if there are parcels that fall outside of that, then there would be a site-specific analysis done for those sites to make the determination on whether or not a FEMA MHU, manufactured home unit, is placed on that parcel.
And then we could choose, for instance, a different reoccurrence interval storm, so it could be a 2-year instead of a 100-year.
You could also choose a different debris flow risk assessment, moderate or high. So those are,
That would make us geologists.
Yeah.
Well,
One of the complaints I get almost daily is from someone, will be the amount of time it's taking to get back on their property. The longer, the higher the risk assessment, the more potential it is to take a little longer to put somebody on their property, correct?
that's an accurate
So
assessment.
if we
yes.
do that, then we're actually saying that we're willing to slow the process a little more to make sure that people are safe.
Correct.
Potentially safe. Because really, the map is kind of like the map that I seen at CAL FIRE had. It's 10,000 feet up, didn't have any real detail. And it is based on, I guess, the gathering of evidence that they've gathered over so many years from different events. Has nothing really to do with our soil geography. It only has to do with a map. So, and what I've heard here is site-specific is the only way to tell if there's, can be an issue or not. So you guys are asking us to do like a 10,000-foot decision?
I don't think so. I don't think so, Supervisor Edson. The this map that you're looking at right here, the coloration of it, where the yellow areas are what are considered low-risk areas, and the, whatever color that is, orangey, browny,
Goldenrod.
thank you, is identified as moderate risk. And then we have one area there near the outlet of Murray Creek that is considered high risk. And this is for a 100-year recurrent storm. This is taking into account the severity of the burn throughout the entire area. That's been based on post-fire aerial photography and spectrometry. It's based on known soil types within the area. It's based upon the steepness of the slopes within the area, and also what we know about the thickness of the layer of soil. And so what you are looking at is a conclusion-based map, and it goes down in terms of diving into the details down to about an 8-kilometer basin as its largest area. That would be about a 4.5 to 5 mile square basin would be the largest basin upon which this is based. And then it's also based upon every single drainage segment that contributes to that basin. Those were mapping that was produced from, as you say, the 10,000-foot elevation in the Butte Fire initial report. So this map that you're looking at is really a conclusionary map that, from a large perspective, identifies risk based on this storm recurrence. But we do have the data. We do have the data that allows us to delve into the details on almost a parcel-by-parcel basis to see how close they are to a given drainage channel with its own percentage or potential for debris flows. And so what we are asking for from the board is the global view of what type of risk is tolerable for the placement of temporary housing.
So I got a question for you. What's odd about that map?
To me, what's odd about it is that when you look at the bottom of the drainages, it appears white. And that's where I would expect to have the greatest amount of debris flows and the highest level of water flows. But I have a feeling, and I don't believe that I have anybody here to confirm this, I believe that those white areas represent those areas within the 100-year firm insurance maps that are produced by FEMA. So those are excluded no matter what.
You're probably right there, yeah. And then the only thing other that jumps out at me there is that, down there by the, I think, North Fork of the West Murray Creek, or North Fork of Murray Creek, that little drainage of the red, that's the only place in the entire burned area where unless the soil type is different there, why?
What's unique about that area is it is severely burned.
Right, but there's a lot of,
It has highly erodible soils.
So the soil type is different than?
Soil type is different. It's also steep. And so what that red is saying is that with an 80 to 100% probability, that area will slide. That area will have a debris flow.
Yeah, and maybe that's accurate. It could be. But it's certainly, whenever there's an anomaly on a map like that, it makes me think that there's probably some point of data that has been collected on that specific area that's different than the rest of the map. Because I don't think that we're going to have just that one small, tiny section it just seems very odd.
If you recall back to Julia Grimm's presentation a little bit earlier today, when she delved into that, there was 1 or 2 slides that actually showed the drainages. And there are about 12 to 15 drainages, anywhere from 1 to 3 miles in length, that all contribute into that area. And so what's happening is this is an area of rain capture that's very steep, very burned, and they're all contributing to a single discharge point, which is really the Murray Creek area.
Well, my thought is that maybe there's a collection point of data that is going on there that is not like a more refined
data point, like, because they researched that, or there's some type of research station out there, or a collection point that wasn't done on the rest of the map? And that's just not true. If you look at the number of segments, and I wish I had the time to count it, and I can show it to you on this PFWERT report where they actually show the segments that contributed. That just happens to be, that's the outline of a single basin. That's the outline of a single one of these basin of analysis, and we have quite a large number of these. And so it has to do with how one does the hydrologic analysis. Anyway, it's kind of an engineering thing, and I can get into that if you'd like. I'd be more than willing to. It just really jumps, whenever I look at a map like that and I see that one anomaly, I think there must be something going on there, but maybe
I think the other thing to keep in mind is that that's a probability layer there. It's not like that will go before the other ones will go. It's that it's more likely to go. It might not slide, but it has a higher probability. The orange areas have a more moderate probability, but we could have massive sliding and debris flow in that area. We might not. And then less likely as you get into the lighter shades.
So, for example, the basin immediately north of that could have had a 58% probability, and this basin had a 62% probability, and that would necessarily cause its color to change, when it's only a 4% difference in the actual probabilistic model combining the various factors that contribute to the analysis. Thank you.
I'd like to add that what we have here is one tool that we're trying to use to determine what we're going to do with the risk assessment for placing of FEMA homes. I think the other practical approach to this is there's the need for a geological engineer to assess the sites. Waiting for the debris to be cleared may not necessarily be something that we would have to do. I think simultaneously a geological engineer could look at prospective sites before they're cleared and get an evaluation of where a home would be placed, and the debris pile is yet to go. So if in the interest of expediting the process, if a geological engineer could look at these sites that are earmarked for a FEMA-located house, could say, yes, this can go here once the debris pile is gone, or it's 150 feet away and we do the waiver of liability, et cetera, et cetera. So the best thing that we can do once we decide what our risk level is going to be determined to be is plug in the geological expertise, and that could happen before the lot is clear. I don't know why it couldn't. I really don't know why it couldn't be done. And that would simultaneously provide the information that would help us move along the way we need to move along.
Something else I'd like to bring up, and I hope this helps to clarify your decision. We still have a lot more decisions to make in terms of risk tolerance when it applies to county roads, to sites of exigent or highly likely debris flows that affect county roads, as well as potential debris flows that would affect existing homes. This report, which is the Phase 1 report, and the report I received yesterday, which is the Phase 2 report, has already identified for me 4 or 5 homes that survived the fire, yet are in exigent danger, and we are taking those on immediately. So there will be a lot more decisions on similar type of analysis for other areas outside of the placement of temporary housing. This is merely the first of many.
Do you know where the sites are that possibly FEMA would be putting the homes? And if so, where do they occur on the map? Wouldn't it be helpful to sort of overlay lay that as well?
Yes, we would love that information. We can't have it.
Well,
That was the question I asked earlier, actually.
I'm sorry, Cliff. Oh, Well, can I ask why you can't have it then?
Well, it's just not available yet, I imagine. I don't know if they've been assigned yet.
But there must be some idea of the people that have applied to FEMA and are needing temporary, permanent, semi-permanent temporary housing, I would have thought, or else we wouldn't be here discussing whether or not temporary housing could be placed on that. Anyway, just a thought, Cliff, I didn't want to...
Are you asking
I actually
two
agree
different
with you.
questions?
I
Are
beg
you
your
asking
pardon?
how many have applied, or?
No, I'm simply saying that you have all these overlays, and, how big a problem is it? Are the FEMA trailers intended or desired to go on the dark orange, or how many are intended to go on the white or the yellow? That would give some useful information, I would think. Thank you.
Okay?
Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
So I want to make sure I understand. So we're looking at this 100-year map based on staff recommendation, and the low risk of debris, which would be the yellow. Yes. Okay, so, go back to the map. So if the board said, yes, we're going to support staff's recommendation at this point, so if somebody came in and there was a FEMA housing unit to go on the goldenrod color or that orange, that would be a site-specific analysis conducted by a geoengineer type. Is that correct?
The yellow would not require the site-specific because it's in that low risk.
Right,
The orange would require because it's in the moderate.
right, okay.
So
So that's staff's recommendation at
Yes.
this point. So we could, as a board, then modify, either go to the low or the moderate risk. If we went to the moderate risk, that means a FEMA housing could go into the gold or the goldenrod, and that darker orange would be where that would be a site-specific analysis.
Yeah, are you talking about the red, the high?
Yeah.
By
the-
Murray Creek?
The Murray Creek area.
Yeah, if you chose the moderate risk.
Okay.
Also, remember, they're asking for asking the board to look at a reoccurrence interval. So you could go with the
Right.
100-year, the 50-year, we
Correct.
did it 25, and we also did it at 10.
Okay.
So it expands those.
That
but
would, those would be the other options.
Exactly, although staff recommends the 100-year.
And so the 100-year low risk is the most conservative approach to
Yes.
this situation for the FEMA housing units only.
FEMA housing
And right now, we know that there are 3 or 4 pending within the county system with the potential of 50, is what I heard?
Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe 3 or 4 have already been placed, but they're out of the burn area.
We've had,
Okay.
2 of 3 have been placed out of the burn area, with 1 being placed in the burn area.
Okay.
The other units, we are not aware of where they are going to be placing them.
Okay. So this policy or direction of the board needs to be in place, it sounds like, in order for FEMA to
place.
continue placing housing units in the burned area.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
You know, I think it's also very important to understand that these maps will change dramatically within a matter of 6 months to 12 months.
Right.
And certainly, within 3 years, it'll be very dramatic change. So,
I would
so that this is a very fluid issue.
And I would assume the FEMA timeline for placement of this housing is within 90 days?
It's within the FEMA timeline?
Okay,
So I got to tell you, we've been going through this with every step of the way.
right?
First, it was site cleanup, couldn't place them, and then it was 150 feet, it was okay. And now it's this. And it's just constantly changing. I don't think anybody here wants anybody to get hurt, especially, nobody. So the FEMA trailers to be, we don't know how many would be set anywhere. And to make a decision on this whole area, which, by the way, very few FEMA trailers will be set on this whole area. What is it, maybe 50 or 60 total out of the whole area? Out of 500 different lots, maybe? Then, you know, I would rather do a site-specific analysis for each one, to tell you the truth. Because that's, if we're concerned about the FEMA trailer, then, you know, and it not being washed away or hurt or damaged, or the people in it hurt or damaged, then we should be able to, you can't even tell me how many are going to be in any area, even if we did analysis on it or made a decision on what the risk factor is. So it's pretty obvious to me if you're going to place one on the side of a hill and there's no vegetation on that side of the hill, and it looks like, I mean, just glancing at it, you're going to be in trouble. If you did a analysis there and it said it's not going to be here with a significant rain, then who would put up any structure there right now? Next year it might be different. Vegetation might make a difference. There's a lot of factors involved. Right? But could be that we're making a decision on a FEMA trailer that isn't going to be placed in any danger anywhere because they don't know that yet. So I just don't, this risk factor thing kind of bothers me a little bit because we don't have all the information.
And Cliff, I agree with you, and that's why the geotech engineering is a critical part of this whole thing. The evaluations, the map gives us an idea that we have this 112 square mile problem. Specific to each site is the real determination of where the risks lie, and those are going to change from site to site to site. We don't want to mix this up with the houses, the FEMA trailers that will not be placed in the burn area. They don't apply. This is not part of that equation. So all of them that are placed out of the burn area, this is not an issue. The issue here is the idea that we have to come up with what FEMA's asking to continue placing houses, and the safeguard is to have a geotech engineer evaluate these sites to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to place people in places that are recommended or not recommended by a professional in that field.
Question, Chair? So, Jeff, first of all, we don't have that capability in-house.
That's exactly right.
So it would be someone from the outside. So is the property owner paying for that? Is FEMA paying for that? Is the county paying for that? How do you facilitate that if we're doing a site-by-site specific?
The question we're asking is if we do contract, which it sounds like we'd have to do that, how do we recover those costs? We're doing the FEMA homes without charge. Any temporary housing we're not charging any fees for that. So the cost recovery falls out of that normal expectation of doing business. So where does the money come from when we're giving away the permits? Hopefully it would come through a contract with some cost recoverable mechanism in place to do an essential job here that I feel is imperative, or where the risk that we accept will be accelerated beyond belief if we don't take the precautions to do this in a step-by-step methodology. I guess you could say, how temporary do you want these houses? We want them to stay there. So that's the idea, that we have this plan in place that hopefully is acceptable to the board, and how we can finance the need for the professionals required is something we're working on.
But it won't be the property owner.
That's our intent, is to not have the burden of these things fall on the property owner, because this is a service that we're trying to provide that makes sense, provides for safety, and can assure the process to be expedited in a manner that will benefit everyone.
I'm just wondering what's next. I mean, first it was, you know, the hazardous removal, 150 feet, and now it's this, and what's next?
The roads.
The roads.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, so, does the board kind of have an idea on what we're supposed to vote on? All right.
Would you like to see the staff recommendation again?
Sure. I bet you it's going to be like the most conservative one, right?
Oh, yes, we are, once again, recommending the 100-year recurrence interval storm with the low risk of debris flow. All other parcels outside of that would be site-specific analysis.
So before we go to this, I'd like to ask the public again, since maybe it's a little more clear to them, if they want to make any comments on this.
Joe Kelly, something that's come up, you're talking about site-specific analysis. Who's doing the site assessment? And then what's the cost of the site assessment and who's paying for it? And I don't know if you've been up, but I was up last week, went up the Mountain Ranch Road, and there was already one right off the road, FEMA trailer being installed. So apparently things are going on without this in certain areas up there. Thank you.
Well, we know people are very often willing to take all kinds of risks. Maybe some of the places shouldn't have been put in the areas they were put in the first place. This sounds like a chance to make things better, but maybe at the expense of people not getting what they want right away. I know there was criticism because there was reluctance to really go back on site with all the toxins and the dangers, and now it looks like another wrench in the works. But you asked what will probably be next. I would think maybe people's going to start worrying about the septic systems and how we get rid of waste on sites. We know we have a history of having ineffectual septic systems, so that will be another glitch in the works to move ahead. The possibility of having some kind of waivers that might alleviate the liability might be considered. And you know, people may not care anyway what people want, what the authorities want to do, and they might just pick up and build a house next to something like they've been doing all along without the authorities knowing that they were there. Who's going to keep an eye on that? You know, all going to be our brother's keepers eventually. But I think there's risk involved in whatever we do in life, and this is another row to hoe, and I'm glad you're up there and it ain't me. Thank you.
Kaz Tomaszewski, if you wouldn't mind going back to that map, the 100-year. So to make sure I understand how it was created, there was a number of variables loaded into some equations, and the variables included geological data on soil type and soil depth, steepness of slope, water catchment direction. In the initial presentation, one of the major factors in the risk of these debris flows was fire-related, in regards to ground cover being removed or the type of vegetation burning, causing particles to essentially become a wax layer. So my question is, was there any data in regards to the character of the burn loaded into this risk assessment in regards to, because it burned hotter in some places, removed more ground cover, burned different types of vegetation, which may affect the risk?
Can I take that? Thank you for the question. Good question. Yes, The burn severity map, or the burn severity layer, is the layer which looked at how hot the soil got and how much was burned. A moderate burn, which is what occurred on most of the rangeland out there, is already greening up. It went so quickly, there was so little fuel, that the soil bank within the dirt is already reseeding and replanting and greening up, and it will hold everything together. That's not going to be an issue. It's those areas where we had moderate to severe burns. A moderate burn would be that you have a high number of trees that are killed, a lot of the understory burned off, but you still have some remaining trees that will survive and will regreen up and will continue to reseed. A severe burn is where there's no branches left, there's no small understory left. In fact, the only thing left standing are the toothpicks or the skeletal remains of dead trees. And there's very little left, and that's a hot burn that actually sterilizes the top layer of soil, and it will burn and kill whatever seed bank was stored within the soil itself. So that is not likely to come back quickly. That would take under or without applying seed or mulch or whatever will take a long time, because the soil, the seed bank will come, and the organics will come from time, from wind, from the presence of birds and that kind of stuff. And they don't tend to populate areas that have nothing living, because it doesn't support insects. It doesn't support other things.
Okay.
So I hope that answered your question. So yes, your burn severity was a very critical layer, and it's a weighted layer, don't forget. They assign importance to these layers of analysis.
So then the answer is that this data was somehow quantified and worked into the equations that became these probability layers.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. So, any other public comments, real quick here? Board, what say you?
I'm leaning towards staff recommendation. It appears to be conservative. It's the 100-year map, it's the low risk, it's site-specific, and it sounds like the majority of things are going to be a very site-specific analysis, and that's what I hear our building department is saying is more needed than anything, because sites are so varying. And, I think a follow-up to that is working on getting a geotech engineer firm or person in place now, if we don't already, to be able to tackle this.
Okay.
Plus, this is not for every site anyway. This is for the
Specific
FEMA
FEMA.
placements.
That's correct.
That's correct.
So we're not closing off explorations on other sites or determinations.
This is specific to the FEMA request.
Well, I move that we accept the staff recommendations of a 100-year recurrence interval storm, low risk of debris flow, and site-specific analysis for all other sites.
For FEMA housing, correct?
Correct.
I'll second.
All of the sites?
The sites that are in the yellow, oh, you're going to make me talk into this again. The sites that are in the yellow are the low risk. The ones that are not in the yellow are the ones that would be evaluated.
I have a question, Chair. What is the actual mechanics of this site inspection for those goldenrod locations? Are we talking days, reports, what?
Well, the job of a geotech engineer is, it's a branch of civil engineering. So they're specialized in geological evaluations. They look at the soil type, the vegetation, the slope, the topography, the aspect, the weather impacts, a variety of different things based on what a weighted load of a potential slide could be and what could stop it and what may not stop it. So each site may have a different right across the road would have an entirely different thing than the one that they're looking at. So they would be tasked with the professional responsibility of determining where the risk would be minimized in the placement of a home based on this map that we're looking at.
Okay, question is, I'm familiar with geotechnical inspections on construction sites and such. What is the application on our situation in days or months or hours? Are we talking an extended period of time to complete these inspections and complete the reports?
Well, I would hope not. I would hope it would be fairly quick. I think Jeff Krovitz could probably answer that better than I can, having an engineering background. But I would imagine that the identifying the scope of work and what the expectations of those surveys would be would clearly identify what and the purpose of what they're out there to do would determine the length of time and turnaround time. I think that I'll give this to Jeff and see what he can add to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. White.
I would assume that it would follow a pathway similar to work that I did back in the Big Bear Landers quake, where I was asked to assess homes for their stability post-earthquake. And so what I would do is I would go to the site, I would look at the home, look at the date of construction, the type of construction, and then I would provide a letter of recommendation. And oftentimes when I came to a home that was on an unreinforced masonry foundation with a large unreinforced masonry chimney going up 2 stories, I would recommend that you take the chimney down and then you put in a perimeter foundation to hold it back down again and move on, or else raise the whole thing. I think that the site inspections would be similar. Once a site, a specific site on a parcel is identified to receive a trailer, then we would have a number of individuals who are recognized by state of California as qualified to make this determination, do site investigation, and provide a report of recommendation. And the report is usually a 1-page or a 2-page report.
Days, weeks, months, hours?
Well, what I would assume is that we would have a list of individuals who are available, and I'm also assuming that when FEMA comes with an application, they will have marked it in the field, and these individuals, we'd call down the list to the first one that could deploy. And we would have a number of these individuals on the list. And if we didn't have enough, and they all got deployed out in the field, and we had more requests, we would get more individuals on the list. So I would assume that this would be an RFP or an SOQ that would pre-qualify professionals who are interested in doing this work with a cost, probably an hourly or report-based cost associated with it.
So can you give me a range?
I wouldn't have any idea. If I was not working here, yeah, I would charge 3 times my rate per hour and do it.
I think he meant, or at least.
Time periods.
How long is it going to take each one to be reviewed?
My concern is here we go, and I know it's a requirement for safety, but this might be another delay of getting people back onto their own properties.
Well,
I'd like to know the best information we have available.
the trailers that are ready to go right now, I believe I have qualification, I just don't believe I have the time, okay? It's going to take the county some time to put this SOQ and get on-call qualified individuals to do this work. So the first few trailers will take longer than necessary, and after that I don't think we're going to notice much difference. I think the whole thing can be done from time of request to time of report in 4 to 5 days.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
But at this time, FEMA is not placing any of these trailers, correct?
Yeah, not until we get past this part of it.
Unless FEMA decides they don't care, and they just place them anyway.
Well, we haven't heard that yet, but I will say that this is again, I would like to bring up the possibility that these could be done simultaneously before or during the cleanup process. There's no point, in my mind, typically or practically, why wait till the site's clear before we go and do the evaluation. We could do it at any time that once we identify these sites. So the 4 or 5 days that it takes to get back a report, we've got that ahead of the cleanup and conceivably. So I don't know why that couldn't happen.
I do have a problem with that, that FEMA needs to tell us what the sites are going to be. And so far, we don't have that information from FEMA, correct?
Fred Wernberg again, FEMA Division Supervisor. FEMA is tracking that information. It's somewhat dynamic in that it's continuously changing. There are a lot of different variables that influence these decisions, not the least of which are some of the ones we're discussing here today. One of the problems that I'm personally running into in trying to acquire this information is that it is perceived to be personally identifiable information. And the federal government has recently experienced intrusions that have resulted in dissemination of personally identifiable information, so they're now very sensitive to releasing that information. We are specifically working with our counterparts at the Joint Field Office to get that information released to the county Director of Environmental Health to support the prioritization of the debris clearance, and could then also be used in this application as well. We've gone through this once before in trying to collect or trying to disseminate this information on the registrants to HHS here in the county, but we were successfully able to get that information shared with Mary Sawicki. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we will overcome this hurdle, and we're working on it. And we recognize and understand the need for it and have been pushing and pounding and trying to get it.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the one hang-up, because we don't want to do these site evaluations for each site that's out there. So we have to wait until we have that information before we could then go and clear the sites with our, or approve the sites.
Right. Understood. We are reiterating that daily.
I didn't get that. I didn't understand what you said.
In order for us to do the pre-approval like Jeff was talking about, Mr. White was talking about, we have to have the sites that we're going to need to look at from FEMA. Otherwise, we would be going and clearing all of them, which would be cost prohibitive.
Correct. I think the trigger will be FEMA will get the request, they will make the determination of availability, they will, and I'm assuming it's the owner who's going to say, this is where I want it, and there will be stakes placed in the ground. That will then trigger us to put a professional on site to say, yes or no, different location.
Yes, and that process, that part of the process is in place with the planning department to be able to work through the permitting requirements and things, and that part of it is already established. I believe they've talked to Mr. White about that. So it will be the contractor that we hire for the haul and install.
Thank you.
So you have a motion and a second.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Ponte, second by Supervisor Kearney.
Just the other way around.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Kearney, second by Supervisor Ponte. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. I'm a no.
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I think you guys brought that back.
Once again, aren't you glad I straightened that abstention?
It'll probably be good.
You gave me a hard time about that. I did it.
You guys,
Is this the only presentation?
Mr. Chair?
Can I ask for a quick favor, and I apologize? I spoke to the auditor and asked if the sheriff's issue could be brought before the Teeter issue. It's obviously up to the pleasure of the board, but...
Yeah, and we still do have the individual staff reports for the fire.
Yeah, we haven't even...
Okay. All right, unfortunately, I'm going to have to take off at 11:30. I have a plane flight. That's why I was asking.
Chair, can we poll the board for a change, because this is a travel arrangement that can't be modified, I understand.
Sure. What do you guys think?
I would accept that allowance at this time to accommodate Captain Macedo and his requirements.
Debbie?
Sure.
All right, so we're gonna put everything on hold for the staff reports on the Butte Fire and go straight to County Council.
Okay, I am saddened that we are here today for, under these circumstances. But as the board is aware, with the passing of Sheriff Kuntz last Thursday, there is a vacancy in the elected position of sheriff. The law allows for an automatic temporary performance of duties. So from the time of his passing until the board appoints a new sheriff, there are provisions that essentially by operation of law, automatically the chief deputy next in line of authority temporarily performs all of the duties of the sheriff until the vacancy is filled. The government code does require that the board make an appointment to this position for the extended or for the remaining unexpired term of the sheriff. Because Sheriff Kuntz was recently elected last year, the remaining portion of his term is until the end of 2018. So when the board does make an appointment, the person that the board appoints would essentially would serve in that capacity until the end of that term in 2018. There are options for the board in appointing someone to this position. The board can look at appointing within. The board can do a recruitment. You can call for applications, have some form of a screening process if the board would like to do that. Ultimately, if the board wants to or desires to do a recruitment and wants to hold interviews of applicants, because it is an elected office, any interviews would be held in an open public session. One alternative that some jurisdictions do use is creating an ad hoc committee that would, which is essentially two board members would screen the applications, and the board could choose, for instance, the top 3 to 5 candidates to come to the board, and then the board could interview those top candidates. There's a variety of options to the board for choosing who they would like to appoint to the position of sheriff. The only caveat of that is that anybody who the board appoints has to also meet all of the requirements of the elected position. So anybody who is appointed sheriff has to meet the minimum qualifications of being sheriff. Those minimum qualifications are outlined in the government code. And also in the elections code. Some of the things that the primary functions or qualifications are actually quite minimal. I would just ask that if the board looks to appoint someone, that all of that person be screened, at least preliminarily, that they meet all of these requirements. The requirements are set out in Government Code 24004.3. I can go through those if you would like at this point.
Maybe you should do that.
Okay. An applicant who is eligible for the position has to meet one of a variety of criteria. They just have to meet one of them. And That they have to be an active or inactive advanced certificate. They have to have an advanced certificate issued by the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, or an active or inactive advanced certificate issued by the Commission on Police Officers Standards and Training, or 1 year of full-time salaried law enforcement experience within the last 5 years and possess a master's degree from an accredited university, or 2 years of full-time salaried law enforcement experience within the last 5 years and a bachelor's degree, 3 years of full-time salaried law enforcement within the last 5 years and an associate's degree, or 4 years of full-time salaried law enforcement experience within the last 5 years and possess a high school diploma or equivalent. One of the other requirements that is imposed on all, on generally all elected officials, unless they're exempted by a separate statute, is that they have to be a registered voter within the county or otherwise qualified to vote for that office. That is set out in the elections code as well as in the government code. So those are the primary qualifications for the position of sheriff. So it's the qualified to vote for that office, and then they have to meet one of the other areas that I just went through. So there could be a variety of people within the sheriff's office that would qualify within these parameters, and then the board also has the ability to, like I said, to do a recruitment and look outside of the department if that is the board's choosing.
Do they have to reside in the county? Did I hear that?
The requirement for being a registered voter, is residency. So they either have to be a registered voter residing in the county, or they have to essentially be qualified to vote for that office, which essentially voting for the office is a resident of the county.
Counsel, you've done the personal research on the government codes regarding our situation, correct?
Yes.
Did you have the opportunity to look at code 25304.5 of the California Government Code?
I've looked at all of them, yes.
Okay. In that code, it does state that the Board of Supervisors may select a person to replace an elected official who has resigned or died in office. Is that correct? It's pretty specific?
Right.
Okay. The research you've done regarding the election, that's for the elected position of sheriff, correct? With those requirements we just talked about?
Correct.
Does it address in your research anything where the acting sheriff's position can be actually filled by an appointee from that department? In other words, a person not to be filling the elected position, but as a command officer acting as a sheriff for that period of time.
Right, that's what I had discussed at the beginning, where there's the temporary performance of the duties, where it automatically, by operation of law, is the chief deputy next in line of authority.
So we can actually appoint somebody
No.
maintaining his,
For the temporary,
let me
that
finish,
is, okay.
let me finish, counsel, please. So we can actually appoint, as a board, someone to take that position in an acting position only that has no desire to run for that elected position. Is that correct?
No, the government code section that you referred to is specifically where the next person in line of command automatically functions as performing the duties of the sheriff. The board doesn't take any action. There is nothing that the board has to do for that to function. So when the sheriff passed, the chief deputy next in line of authority automatically executes or temporarily performs the duties of the sheriff. They don't have the new title of sheriff. They are just temporarily performing all of the duties of the sheriff until the board makes an appointment for the next sheriff.
And so how long is that?
There is no requirements on timelines. The government code does say that the board shall make the appointment. So it doesn't say the board has to take action within, a week or a month. It says that the board shall make the appointment. And until that happens, the next chief deputy next in line of authority would perform the functions of the sheriff.
Okay. I understand that theory, and I understand that section of the code, but I do have a problem with the code we mentioned, 25304.5 of the California Government Code, where it says the board may instead of shall. So I think there's a conflict between the two codes there. And I guess that's what the board has to decide, if they desire to make an appointment at this time or go with our existing recommendation of the next ranking officer.
Actually, it's not a recommendation that we would make because it already is in the code, right?
Right.
25304.5 already is in place.
24105.
24105.5.
Yeah, 104.5 it's already in place. It started when.
There's nothing that the board has to do for the temporary performance of the sheriff's duties.
Counsel, thank you. One more question. I am confused, and I know that we discussed it shortly, that the vacancy should be filled by the next general election or the existing term. I know we have an election coming up in 2016 for a general election, but not for the term of the position vacated by the sheriff. Can you give me some direction on that, please?
I've done further research and looking at the case law and other Attorney General opinions on point. In situations like this, it is actually clear that the appointee would serve for the full remaining term of the prior sheriff's term. So it would go through the end of 2018.
Please bear with me, counsel. So a person desiring to run for the elected position of sheriff, they would have to participate in that endeavor for the end of the existing term in 2018, or can they run for that position in 2016?
There isn't a position in 2016.
So they could actually start campaigning and run for the election in 2016?
No.
They can't?
No, because that position is not going to be on the ballot in the 2016 election.
Thank you, Counsel.
Well, I'm a little confused by that because didn't Barbara Yook have to run for office?
That was a different situation. There were different circumstances around the death of the incumbent district attorney, the timing of it.
Because his election was coming up, I guess. Is that correct? That's why?
It's my understanding that there are different provisions for when somebody passes away, either after the filing date for the election, which is my understanding is what happened, and there's nobody else to run, so he by default won the election, even though he had previously deceased. And so he essentially, he passed away between the election and the starting of the new term, and there is a different government code section that applies to that situation.
So in other words, he was elected in November, but didn't take the new term till January 1, is that what happened?
He passed away before he could take the new term.
Okay, but he was actually elected?
He was
Or
elected because
re-elected?
there was no one else that ran against him.
Oh, he ran unopposed.
He ran unopposed, and unfortunately, he passed away before the election even happened, is my understanding. So at the time the election occurred, there was no one that was, unfortunately, he had passed before the election happened, so at the time he was elected, it was already vacant. If that makes sense. And so there is a different, separate government code section that governs that situation.
And there's no definition what temporary means if we appoint or not appoint in this current scenario. It could go on forever.
I
or until
wouldn't
the
recommend
next-
that. I would recommend that the board take some action towards filling the vacancy, whether it's an appointment, whether it's a recruitment, taking steps towards filling it, because the government code does indicate that the board shall fill it.
By, at the next regularly scheduled election.
No.
Just reading the same code that you just told us about, so.
I don't want to get into arguing the law with you, Chair Edson.
I'm not arguing, I'm just reading what it says.
Counsel, does case law take precedence over statute law?
You look at the statute and the case law, typically will explain how the statute functions. They basically explain it in further detail, giving authority for how to implement the statute.
So case law does not supersede or take
It
precedence over statute law?
It explains the statute. So explains how to interpret the statute and how to implement the statute.
Do we have any policy regarding, in our sheriff's department, that establishes chain of command in situations like this?
Yes, there is, and that's, and in that policy, it identifies the succession plan.
Could you run down that succession, please? Just the
Sure.
positions,
So,
or whatever you feel necessary.
so in essence, this policy lays out the succession. So the chief deputy next in line of authority, which is the term of art used in the statute, would go by the chain of command listed in the manual. And the first chain of command is Operations Bureau Commander. From there, it goes to Custody Bureau Commander. From there, it goes to Operations Division Commander, Special Operations Division Commander, and then Deputy Sergeant.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Public comments?
My name is George Fry. I think it's important for the board to, and I hope that they do this, that the transition is seamless. We have a process that has been going on while Sheriff Kuntz was the sheriff, and I think it ought to continue to go on with the next person down. In this case, it would be Captain Macedo, who is so familiar with everything, as you well know. And I think for the sake of seamlessness, I would hope that the board would appoint Captain Macedo as an appointment of sheriff until the next election in 2018. Thank you.
Vicki Reinke. I just wanted to make the comment too. It's obviously very sad that we've lost Gary Kuntz as our sheriff. We all voted. A lot of people in this county voted for him. He was a well-liked man. And the sheriff is an elected position for a reason. So I think we have to respect that idea of an elected official. I understand that we can't do a special election, I guess, for a new sheriff, so it has to be an appointment. So I guess I'm asking the board to make that a very committed, something that you're going to do that's very important. it is important that you're going to be able to open it up to applicants, that you do a really good process for picking that next sheriff, because you're going to be doing something for the citizens that we normally get to do. So anyway, I guess I'm just encouraging that. I'm sure there's some excellent people in line that maybe would get appointed, but I think the process has to happen so that the people that live in Calaveras County see what's going on, and that we can feel good about the new sheriff that we have. Thank you.
Good morning. I hope you're all well. My name's Candace Kesey. I co-founded the nonprofit, the Friends of the Calaveras Sheriff's Office, with Sheriff Coons in 2012, and I am a close family friend. I've worked closely with Gary for the last few years, and if you don't mind, I had to prepare my notes, so if you don't mind that I read to you a little bit. I'm here for you to ask of you to please consider the consequences of making the wrong choice to fill the position of the sheriff. The department, the county, has just came off of the Butte fire and still dealing with the aftermath. The sheriff's office has recently dealt with several shootings and homicides. The department is down deputies and short staff, and not to mention a huge funeral and procession to manage. I'm sure there's been several prospects that threw their head in the ring for this position, but let's remember what the taxpayers voted for the last two elections, what they voted for, what they wanted. They voted for Gary, and under Gary was Jim Macedo, Captain Jim Macedo. Gary would not have had the administration he had without Jim. And so please consider that. Please consider that you don't have to make a decision today. You don't have to do an appointment right now, even though you have recommendation from county council to do so. You don't have to make a decision today. So please don't do something in haste, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thanks, Candace.
And I would just like to clarify, I'm not recommending that you necessarily make an appointment, I'm just indicating that you have that option. The other option is to put it out for recruitment, and I'm really looking for direction so HR and the necessary steps can be initiated.
Thank you, counsel.
Kaz Tomaszewski, Calaveras Cannabis Alliance. If I understand it correctly, basically the board would be appointing a sheriff to serve until the next scheduled election in 2018. It is concerning to me that the board would be appointing a public office for that length of time without a vote from the people being involved. And my question is there any way, is there anything in the code by which the board could choose to make a temporary appointment and hold an emergency election or a special election?
The law is very clear that a special election is not an option, and that's ultimately why the government code allows for the temporary exercise or performance of the duties, while the board does reach out, whether it's through a recruitment, whether it's to make the decision.
So,
I understand that the desire to have it decided through an election, but with the Attorney General opinions that are very much on point and the supporting case law, it's clear that a special election cannot be held.
okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I've been very happy with the sheriff's department compared to what other police departments I experienced in Midwest. But the great legal minds we have in here, there's got to be a way that either just let the natural flow go right now, whatever is the structure right now, because there's no requirement that you have to appoint somebody today. There's no date time when you have to appoint somebody today. But you have a structure in process right now that was established, and I don't think anybody, most people agreed with what Sheriff Coons, what he did, but also to be fair. There's got to be a process, some way, verbiage, that the next general election, 2016, somehow it can be put on a ballot. It's not a special election, it's a general election, and call it whatever you want to be fair to everybody. And there's no way I want to say anything negative about the president's status. But there's got to be a way, even if you have to think outside of the box, that yes, you're going to be looking for somebody who wants to take that place. Postpone it till 16th. Word it whatever you want. Massage it whatever way you want. In this state, it's not that hard to massage laws, okay? What it is right now, it's functioning. It's still got people's trust and respect, but the people should be able to, at the next general election, which is 2016, to put on a ballot. Call it whatever you want it. I'll be dazzled, especially if it's in English. But use some common sense. Respect the public, and I want these guys respected. Figure out a way, and you got plenty of months to think about it, how you're going to do it. Put it on a ballot on 2016 as the next general election, and everybody's going to have their say-so. It's fair to the public, and it's fair to these guys. Thank you.
And may I chime in real quick, Chair? Sure. Believe it or not, I actually agree with Mr. Race.
Oh my God, where's the calendar?
And I had, let me clarify, I had agreed with Mr. Race. The government code does indicate the next general election, so I thought that there was an option for doing that. But the more and more that you research and the more that you look at Attorney General opinions explaining what the next general election means in statute, it's very clear that it can't be the next general election of the county. It's the next general election that position is on for, or that it is being considered for. And so I just want to make it clear to the board of what your authority is here. And one of the things that I found very compelling is in an Attorney General opinion. I understand that it is an Attorney General opinion, which is not as weighty as case law, but it specifically says that the supervisors only have the power to appoint a successor for the total portion of the original term remaining unexpired. The successor appointed to fill the vacancy does not have to run for office until the next general election at which the office would normally be filled, and the board may not appoint an individual for a shorter term to be filled at the next general election occurring in the county. So in reading that and knowing that that's how the Attorney General has interpreted it, I don't believe that the board can direct staff to put this position on the next general election for the county, but rather the next general election that would normally be filled or would normally be considered for the sheriff's position.
Is it even an advisory?
That's not, it's appointing the position.
Whatever you say.
Counsel, I have a question. Does the board have the authority to change the sequence of the election forthwith? So now can we change the election of the sheriff on the 16th for a 4-year term?
I do not believe so, because he was elected in 2014 for the term through the end of 2018, and I believe that based on what I have read, that anybody that the board appoints would serve the duration of that term, that existing term.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly? Joe Kelly. The concept of succession, you went through and you said chief deputy ran it down, but you didn't put any names with it to go by the different folks in those succession areas. I'd like to hear that. And then my concern is on an appointment thing by the board, or can the succession be left the rest of the term of the past sheriff without an appointment necessarily by the board, just leave it as a succession. But if not, and if there is an appointment based on succession, would it provide security to the successor as if he were elected? In other words, he's there as if he is the sheriff-elect and not as an appointee that could be removed at any time. That's my concern. I don't want to see a shuffle by a board. Thank you.
It's my understanding Operations Bureau Commander is Captain Macedo. Custody Bureau Commander is Captain Ballard. I do not know the positions, who fills the positions of Operations Division Commander, Special Operations Division Commander, or Duty Sergeants. I would defer to those of you from the Sheriff's Office that know who is in those positions beyond the top two.
Good morning, Jim Macedo, Captain with the Sheriff's Office. I am currently the Operations Bureau Commander. Captain Ed Ballard is the Custody Bureau Commander. Lieutenant Chris Hewitt is the Operations Division Commander. And Lieutenant Dennis Huberty is the Special Operations Division Commander. And Lieutenant Tim Sturm is the Custody Division Commander. Bureau is a larger, all-encompassing group that is comprised of several divisions.
Okay, thank you.
Almost good afternoon. You know, it's a sad time, and it's a pretty awesome responsibility that is put in your laps. However, this is our county, and the consequences of your decision carry some very strong long-term consequences. Unfortunately, it appears that the people's voice can't necessarily be heard in the decisions being made via an election before the end of Gary's his term. I would suggest a possibility. I think we have a lot of good candidates here. I would suggest that we default to what I believe protocol would be, which I believe would be the senior officer, which is my understanding is Ed Ballard. I think the people have certainly spoken with regard to their support for Ed Ballard, even though he did not win the election. He certainly had the support of the people. As far as Captain Macedo, gosh, I don't see any reason why he cannot continue to do what he's doing right now and continue to fill that position. So I would ask for you to just take those situations into consideration. I think that might be kind of a compromise that may make everyone happy. Not that everyone's going to be 100% happy, but we've got some good men here. But again, it's a very awesome responsibility that's being put in the hands, and I think the default to protocol might be the appropriate measure. Thank you.
I don't understand the default protocol.
What I believe that this gentleman was referring by default protocol is the procedures manual that outlines the succession plan, which is the Operations Bureau Commander, Custody Bureau Commander, Operations Division Commander, and down the list. The Operations Bureau Commander, which is the next succession, is currently filled by Captain Macedo. And then from there, it would be the Custody Bureau Commander that is filled with Captain Ballard. If that is, in fact, what, that is already in place. Just so everyone is aware and the board is aware, there is nothing that the board has to do for this to, that's what's currently in place, because that is what the law allows to automatically happen when a vacancy occurs. So when the vacancy happens, this is the default that automatically happens. Nothing further needs to happen for the sheriff's office to continue to operate and have the necessary authorities for the Operations Bureau commander to do all of the duties of the sheriff. And if the Operations Bureau commander is not available for whatever reason, then the Custody Bureau commander would step in and do all of the functions of the sheriff. So all of that is already in place. What's before you is direction on how you would like to move forward with the appointment of the title of sheriff. And in doing that, the board can put it out to, can solicit resumes and applications. You don't have to do that. If you want to, if the board is in consensus and you say you would like to appoint somebody from within, the board has that flexibility. The only caveat is whoever the board appoints has to meet the same requirements of the elected position.
And that's the issue that I was going to ask you to clarify. So if we wanted to select Captain Macedo to be sheriff, we could not do that because he doesn't meet the residency requirement, correct?
It's my understanding that he does not and doesn't intend to move to the area to meet the residency requirement to be sheriff, to hold the title.
So I just wanted to put that out so everybody understood that that wasn't a possibility for us to do. We can't override that?
No, that is one of the election code requirements. And the only flexibility there is that if the person doesn't meet the requirements of sheriff when you would like to appoint them, you can make the appointment pending residency. So for instance, if there was an applicant that you would like who doesn't live here, you can go forward and make the appointment and on the understanding that they wouldn't be sworn in and they wouldn't take office until they met the requirements of sheriff, including the residency requirement.
Okay. Bonnie?
Thanks.
I'm responding to the last gentleman that spoke, I believe, in subverting the process that's already in place. The gentleman said it would make the people happy, but he wasn't speaking for all the people, because I didn't particularly agree with him, and I don't want y'all to go away with the feeling that his recommendation was what all the people are in agreement for. So, thank you.
All right. Any other public comments? Okay, go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, sir. Is there any way you can reach the court? I know those judges had nothing to do all day. Has a friend of the court or something make a judgment or a decision that's still legal, but it covers your butt, but the state, under the circumstances, can we approach one of the judges, local judges, that can help make this particular decision? To me, to have an unelected for 4 years, it's not very reasonable. If you tell me that somehow we can squeeze it in by seeking a relief, or whatever you want to call the big legal terms, the local court, judges. We can approach the judge. All you can say is go take a hike, right? It won't cost you anything.
Thank you, Peter. Joe?
Joe Kelly, I'd like to get my second question answered. Would succession provide security to the successor as if elected? And the same thing would apply too, as if you're going out and you're going to, I believe you're saying you can appoint somebody to come in and act as sheriff.
It's not acting, you're appointing the sheriff.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm using that as to fill that position, as somebody that lives in the county could come in and be appointed to that position. Would that also provide that person the security as if elected? I want to look at both sides, whether it goes through the succession process or an appointment with somebody from here coming in and being put in, that they are as if elected, and you can't touch them to say you're fired.
Right.
That is correct. The appointment is for the full term.
Yeah, the board wouldn't be able to just.
So
There's-
the board has
there's-
no hands-on after that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Might as well take my second shot. The sheriff selected Captain Jim Macedo to be the number 2 person in his organization. And Captain Macedo, in terms of my observations here in front of this Board of Supervisors, has done an outstanding job. And the fact that he has done an outstanding job, I think the decision should be made as soon as possible, and I think the decision should be Captain Jim Macedo, because it would be a seamless, once again, a seamless transition. And the reason being that I think it's important to do it as soon as possible is that it would be healthy for the morale of our sheriff's department as well. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jay Smith. I'm asking for some clarification, because what I'm hearing out here is that Jim Macedo is the incumbent new sheriff, but that Jim Macedo is not qualified to become the sheriff because of residency. Therefore, it falls into Ed Ballard. Is this correct, or am I misunderstanding?
No, you're misunderstanding. Because the incumbent sheriff is the appointed sheriff when the board takes action. Before that, all that it is the Operations Bureau commander temporarily fulfilling or performing the duties of the sheriff. So until an appointment is made, there is not a county sheriff per se. There is just an Operations Bureau commander or Custody Bureau commander doing the function or doing the duties of the sheriff. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And the temporary function, because they aren't the title of sheriff, they do not have to meet the requirements of the elected office until an appointment is made.
Until the appointment is made.
Right.
Okay. And one other question is, excuse my ignorance on this, but I cannot believe that you guys would have the authority to, and you apparently do, to appoint a 3-year term sheriff without an election. Does not make sense. This gentleman that was right here, you got to figure out a way to get it on the election, on 2016. It just doesn't make sense that nobody here would have any say in it, and that you guys would just do that. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any other public comments? All right, I'll bring it back to the board.
So can I, clarification, typically, sheriff departments have the sheriff and undersheriff, and then the command system here. So because we did not have, and so if there was a leave of the office of sheriff, typically then the code would allow for the undersheriff to step in and carry on, and no decision of the board or the voters or anything like that. They would fulfill that term until that sheriff term was up. Because we don't have an undersheriff, this is why we have this command system or command process in place here, correct?
Correct. It would automatically go to the undersheriff. If the county does not have an undersheriff, which we don't, then it would go to an assistant sheriff. If the county doesn't have one, which we do not have, then it would go to the chief deputy next line in authority. So that is where we would fall, and we would look at the succession plan in the manual, which is what we had discussed, the Operations Bureau commander and down, for the succession plan for who is the chief deputy next in line of authority.
Okay. How long have we not had an undersheriff?
It's my understanding that we haven't had one for the, okay.
5 years, right?
I believe
So was that a
we had an
Sheriff Kuntz
undersheriff.
decision then, not to have an undersheriff?
That was my understanding. But,
Okay.
but the sheriff's office can clarify more because I'm not, I don't know.
Gary did away with the undersheriff.
I think there was
But there's
Undersheriff
reason-
Mike Walker, is that correct, Captain?
Let's
Captain Ed Ballard.
let's not make this like an open
Yeah.
discussion here, okay? Let's-
Captain Ed Ballard Sheriff's Office. Actually, our last undersheriff was Undersheriff Michael Walker.
Right.
He retired, leaving in order to use that money to prevent layoffs. So he retired his position to use the money to keep some of the rest of us. And then Sheriff Kuntz, when he came on board, he elected to keep that going and not have an undersheriff.
So the undersheriff position was more or less eliminated under Sheriff Downham's?
Yes.
Okay.
See? Facts. All right, any other public comments? Bring back to the board again. Debbie, you have anything else that you would like to say?
No, it's just, it's just a very difficult situation under difficult circumstances. I was saddened to hear that, whatever we do on a short-term basis, that there could not be some form of an election earlier rather than later, because I really feel this particular position, is elected and the voters should have that ability to vote their sheriff. But, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a judge, and so as I read this information, it looks like, we have a lot of general codes and election codes that kind of ties our hands to this, that whoever we select does fulfill the term of office, and there'll be an election in 2018. That's, I had wished it would be different, but it sounds like it's not. And as for appointing, I'd like to see the continuity as well. I don't know if, sounds like Captain Macedo would be next in line, if they would be willing to have some discussion. I mean, I haven't heard one way or the other if he is willing to relocate to the area, become a registered voter. To meet that particular classification, I feel that's very important. The office is an elected position. We debated almost 4 or 5 hours last meeting just about residency in different districts for COG. So this is something that, is a pretty important part of the election process in the county code. So I don't know if Captain Macedo would be willing to do that, and we haven't had that, at least I haven't had that discussion with him. And I don't know if we go next in line then to where we have Captain Ballard, and if he is all interested. So I don't know if we go out and do a recruitment process, an interview process. I hear he said, she said, they want, they don't want. I would definitely want to hear from the potential people that may be next in line, if they are at all interested in fulfilling the duties of this office for the remainder of the term. Or if not, then it looks like we're faced with or somebody from within, if we look at a recruitment process.
Okay.
But I do feel strongly, I mean, it's very well cited here, and, if they have to be a resident and a registered voter, that's pretty important to the process.
I have personal experience with the Sheriff's Department, and I know every single person that's in this room right now, and I could not respect them more. I feel that the position of sheriff should be one left to an election by the people, not by an appointment. I also know we have some very trying times in this county right now. I have all the faith in our sheriff's department, and I have the faith of the people in this county and this board. It's my position that not to take any action at this time and let Captain Macedo continue to run this department until we can have an election to elect a sheriff, to replace Sheriff Kuntz, and that's going to be a hard job. I do know that the relationship when it comes to command people and a law enforcement agency, and I know the relationship that Sheriff Coons had with Captain Macedo, Captain Ballard, Lieutenant Hubbity, Chris Hewitt, Lieutenant Strom. I think right now that's the best team that we've got. I do regret that we have to wait until 2018. I will be looking into that. I also wish we could have an election in 2016. And I appreciate council's efforts to provide the information to this board. I thank you, Megan. At this point, I would say, let our procedure established by the Sheriff's Department take place, and let Captain Macedo continue to run this department until replaced by a sheriff selected by election. Okay, Steve?
I don't have a lot of different things to add. They both have almost said it all. Sheriff Kuntz was elected by a majority, 2 elections in a row, and we have to respect that. Has set up an administration that was of his choosing, and so I have to think that the voters supported him in that and believe that. If we believe in the electoral process, I would like to see no changes at this time. It would be great if we can figure out a way to bring the voters back into it in 2016. But I believe that the department is being run competently. It is understaffed, but it was before last week, and that's something that they need to work on, but they know that. So I'm going to concur with Mike, and really Debbie too, that at this time I don't support any changes. I am hoping we can figure out some way to put them on the ballot in 2016. I think it's important that the voters vet that position. It was a very important position, and it remains that way, and it should be filled by them. So at this time, I would like it to continue the way it is running. And hopefully, we'll be able to figure something out as far as a replacement goes sooner than later.
I do want to clarify, I'm for appointing somebody. I'm not for this kind of management style through the 3-year term. I'm not saying we have to do something at this meeting, but I think we need to do something sooner rather than later. I think it's important to have solid leadership and a leader at the top, and I think at some point we need to select somebody for the elected position of sheriff.
And I don't completely disagree with that, Supervisor Pawnee. What I'm saying is, number one, we don't even know if these candidates want to take that position,
Right.
but it is a high-pressure, high-profile position. And I think if we can buy some time by not doing anything immediately, maybe we can find that out. But maybe we can also, as I said, could you change the voting sequence? I've been trying to fly through the Muni codes here, and I certainly don't have council skills at doing that, but I don't want to close the door on anything other than, at this time, I'd like no action.
So I got a question on,
And I just want to clarify just a little bit from what I'm hearing here is the section that Supervisor Oliveira had referred to earlier on about May. You had referred, it's 24105. The discretionary term May is used for typically filling elective offices. But further in that section, it talks about specific to sheriff's offices. And in that, because we're dealing with the sheriff's office, it's not discretionary language, it's mandatory language. And it says, if the vacancy occurs in the office of sheriff, the duties of such office shall be discharged by the undersheriff, or if that position is vacant, by the assistant sheriff, and then it goes on through the deputy, the line of
What section
authority.
is that, counsel?
That is 24105.
24105. I was speaking to 25304.5, the
Oh,
government code.
point five, that is,
Of the government code.
right,
Yeah.
that was I apologize, I thought you were referring to this
No,
section.
I was speaking to 25304.5 of the government code,
Point
which
five.
deals with the death of an elected official. Yeah.
Yeah, that, I apologize, I
Not
thought
a
that you were
problem.
referring
Thank
to that. But you said 2530,
25304.5.
okay, 25304.5. That specific section was similar to what were talking about when the prior DA passed away. That is when that section is triggered. If that section is not triggered, which it's not here, then you would look to 25304, not the .5.
That's why I raised the concept.
And in that section in 25304, that's where the board has the authority to make the appointment. And in that section, it says that the board shall fill by appointment all vacancies that occur in any office. And so that's where the board has the authority to make the appointment.
Okay, so since you went further with that, at some time or another in this county, we had to establish the sequence of the elections. What would prevent us from changing that sequence and electing a new sheriff in 2016 for a four-year term forthwith?
I can certainly look into the process of changing the terms of elected offices. Just from the experience, or just from the research that I have done in jurisdictions that have, or if you want to chime in.
All county elected offices are required to go to election for a four-year term during the gubernatorial general. So the gubernatorial general and the presidential general are two separate elections, and you can't change which election they occur.
Excuse me, could you identify yourself for the
I'm
folks?
sorry. I'm Rebecca Turner. I'm the county clerk recorder and registrar of
Thank you,
voters.
Rebecca.
And that's state law?
That is
Constitution?
government code, yes.
So the constitutional officers are,
The constitutional officers would be the sheriff, the DA, I think just the sheriff and the DA. What's that? And the assessor. So any of the other offices could be appointed and not elected. Those three offices are required constitutionally to be elected.
and they have to go in the presidential year?
They cannot go during the presidential year. They're required to go during the gubernatorial election.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So I do have a question. So if we say we just continue with the process as is without appointing a sheriff, the board would have a lot more say over that position than a sheriff, right? I mean, the sheriff as an elected office holder is not, I mean, we're hands off and the sheriff does what the sheriff wants to do because they're elected official. What would the authority be? Your authority of the sheriff would be greatly reduced if it wasn't an actual sheriff, right? Like if it's the custom, whatever Captain Macedo is now, say he just kept running the show. He's not a full sheriff at that point.
He is not a full sheriff, but he does all of the duties and functions of the sheriff.
But what would the authority of the board have over that position?
The board has the authority to appoint a sheriff.
Right.
That's it.
But so there's not a huge, except for that if we decided, that the board decided at any point, we could just appoint a sheriff at any given time. I mean, I don't understand for me, just running it how it's running now is fine. But it sounds like the law doesn't like that.
Well,
Or it's quiet on it.
filling vacancies says that the board shall appoint a sheriff. When there is a vacancy, the board shall fill it. through an appointment.
But it doesn't tell us.
It doesn't give a
when.
timeline,
So we
so-
could wait till 2018, right before the election, if we wanted to.
Hypothetically speaking, there's nothing on point that says that you can't. I would recommend that you do a lengthy, if that's the direction of the board, a lengthy recruitment.
Well, yeah, I'm not.
There is nothing that says how long the recruitment has to be.
I'm not in favor of that, actually. I'm in favor of appointing the sheriff today. If Eddie Bellard wants to be the sheriff, I say that we appoint him the sheriff and we move on. Because Captain Macedo can't be sheriff because of the residency. That's how I would like to run things. 'Cause I don't, and there's at least 2 people that agree with me. So, but regardless of that, I just think that's the best, we just need to have a sheriff. We need to have things, it's just a difficult time, like you're saying right now in the county, and we shouldn't get messed up with this appointment process and just do the thing that we know will work, And I would say appoint Macedo because he was the next guy in line, but we can't. And so the next guy behind him is Ballard. So no, we can't. We can't appoint Macedo because he doesn't live.
You want to talk up here at the podium? All right, good.
Actually, I think you can, if I remember what you said, counsel, if they agree,
Right.
before they're sworn in, they agree to fulfill the requirements of the residency.
They would just
But
have to
he's-
meet the requirements of the position by the time
Before
they're sworn in.
But hasn't Captain Macedo said he doesn't want to do that?
Well, we don't know
He's
that.
not here.
Okay.
Maybe what should be done is we could ask our personnel professional to go at least through the top 3 in the line of succession in the department and ask them. I mean, we're debating, they may not even want to be in the position, and to make sure they do, and then regard it that way.
Okay, you guys finished there?
That's
That's
certainly
asking
an
a
option.
lot for folks in the public forum.
Cliff has to say. So
It's their choice.
So my thought is about not only the public, but the sheriff's department. We've all been through quite a bit in the past month and a half or so. Stability is extremely important. And I think that if we do nothing right now, succession is there, at least at this point. I think people are probably pretty comfortable with that. Just in the past few days, we've been going through codes, and they've changed because we're still learning. We've never been through this before. It's pretty darn. I know Megan has been working awful hard researching different codes because they're all over the place, and that's frustrating for and very, very time consuming. I don't know if we're if we found all the answers yet. So I am certainly in no hurry to do this. I think that we're good. The Sheriff's Department is just a strong, very, very strong right now, barring the fact that they're missing, folks. But they know where they are, and they know what their command structure is. They know what to expect. The public knows what to expect from them because it really hasn't changed that much. Barring, I keep saying that, but without Gary here. So I just don't want to rush into this. I happen to be a believer that sheriff's office should be an elected position. I don't want to make that decision if I don't have to. I'll tell you right now. Because to me, it's extremely important for the people to speak on what that position is. And so if it comes down to where we have to, then that is not going to be something I take very lightly. But right now, I think we have we have to continue on working. We have a lot to do still. We still are in the middle of a crisis. And I know a lot of people think because the sun's out and there's no smoke in the air that we're through with that. We're not through with it. So stability is extremely important. And I believe the Sheriff's Department, in its plan that it currently has, is stable. And until we figure out the rest of it, I believe we can just keep operating the way we are. That's my position on it.
So should we bring it back at the next meeting and have a, are you looking for more study to make sure we have the information correct? What are you looking for?
My wish is that we could put on 2016 election. That would be my wish.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees with that.
And so if we can do that somehow,
Counsel,
then
could I have
that would be my
a quick question? Is there any way we can determine without going to a judicial decision whether or not that is possible? Election 2016?
I personally, I do not believe that the court would take a position on something like this because the government code allows the board to make the appointment to fill the vacancy. And it says that the board shall appoint to fill the vacancy.
So, to dealing with this issue today, do we need an action?
No, this is really just direction on how the board wants to proceed. Again, the board can make an appointment today if the board wants to. You don't have to. There is a plan in place that is allowing the department to run. What I'm looking for is direction on how the board wants to proceed with an appointment. If you want to put it out for recruitment, if you want staff to reach out to the top officials of the sheriff's office to see if they would even want to be considered for an internal appointment. If you want us to do a full recruitment and ask for resumes, we're just wanting to find out what the board would like to do with this position.
Yeah, to me, I mean, it sounds like confirming with the top captains to start with would be a good place to start. I mean, I think, I mean, we could ask Eddie right now what he wanted to do, but I put him on the spot, so.
I personally would like to give us and the Sheriff's Department a little bit of time here. I mean, it's not even a week that Sheriff Coons passed away. And that's a lot, that's a very, very short amount of time to be making a decision like this, especially when we don't have to. Because we already have a functioning Sheriff Department. It has planning in place to be able to operate just as it was before. I don't see us having to rush on this deal.
Bring it back in a couple of weeks? Or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, Sheriff Coons hasn't even been gone yet a week. And so, I think that we could probably discuss it maybe in a couple of weeks.
I agree.
That's fine.
I would like to extend that period for probably looking to at least 120 days. Let things calm down a little bit. That way we'll have some time to research it. Have a chance to, some folks take a look at it. But can we do that, counsel?
We can do it.
Right now, there is already the position, the duties are being fulfilled. So again, the direction, if the board wants to direct staff to come back with more information in 2 weeks, if you want to direct staff to come back with more information in a month, 190 days, we just need direction.
I would recommend that this come back before the board on the 17th of November, and I would ask that staff be given some time to talk to the top candidates to see who might be interested in this, to be a step one if we have an internal opportunity to appoint somebody. If not, then that's going to look at an appointment from the outside, and that, again, will have its own set of comments and rules, et cetera. But I would rather move sooner than later, and I think given a couple weeks, we'll give everybody time to breathe a little bit. It sounds like some people do their own research. County council can do their research. Our election, Rebecca can confirm, but certainly gives some staff time to kind of figure out who might even be qualified for this position and wants it. I know the sheriff position comes with a lot more pay and benefits and PERS and all of that, so I think whoever might be interested or qualifies would have to consider all of those things. And I know the current command is in place, and they'll do a very fine job, but again, their plate is overfloweth as well, and I think they need to know they have some leadership and direction too going forward.
The question I have is that normally an elected official has requirements on how much time they have to be here in state or in the office. So if an elected official is going to be out of state, for instance, for more than 30 days, I believe it has to be approved by the Board of Supervisors, and past that, I think it goes to the governor. And we had an issue like this many years ago with Sheriff Downham. So I know that Captain Macedo is not officially sheriff, but he is there in fulfilling the duties of the sheriff. However, he is going out of state for training, and he will be out of state during this period. So that's my concern, is that my office, as well as many of the other offices, are looking to authority while these, whoever it is, elected or appointed, need to be there to fulfill those duties. So my concern is, if he's not here, I mean, certainly we'll just go to the next person, which would be Captain Ballard, but the board needs to be understanding of that, while I am, very cognizant of the fact that this is very new and this just happened and this is horrible circumstances, it doesn't, I don't think it does the constituencies any favors by not taking an action of any kind. You can't represent a constituency if you're not here, and you can't represent a constituency if you don't live here. And I, as an elected office, take that very seriously. And so I would just urge the board that you bear that in mind. I mean, this is a horrible set of circumstances, and it couldn't have happened at a worse time. We seem to be getting hit one way or another. And for my office, I need to know, what do we do to move forward if the person in charge is not going to be in state?
If the person who is functioning or exercising the duties of sheriff is not available or is out of state, then it would go to the next person who is the next in line of authority. Okay. So for purposes for your department, if the Operations Bureau Commander, Captain Macedo, is not available to perform the duties of the sheriff, then the Custody Bureau Commander, Captain Ballard, would step into that role and he would perform the duties of the sheriff.
But it's not like how it would be for any other elected, where the board would have to basically take an action to bless that not being here. So if I leave, if I, as the auditor controller, leave the state for 30 days, I'm supposed to let the Board of Supervisors know, and they basically have to bless that absence.
Because he's not the sheriff, he wouldn't be the appointed sheriff.
Right.
It would automatically go to the Custody Bureau Commander, and no, the board would not have to approve that, because the approval is for the elected office.
Okay.
Or
right.
The elected office.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we need to define how come Captain Macedo is not here right now, and where he's been for the last 30 to 45 days, and where he's going to be. Lieutenant Hewitt, can we hear from you on the status of Captain Macedo and what training he's taken and where that's at?
Is it okay if I address it?
Yes, Captain, you can address that, yes. Either one.
Captain Macedo he's been at an FBI academy, which is a very honored thing. He spent a long time trying to get in there to attend that academy, and it only benefits our department in the future. So that's what he's doing now. He would have been there had he still been there had our boss not passed away. He came out here to take care of that. He's been helping out the department, and he intends to finish that. But rest assured, between me and him, wherever he's at, we can come up with something to get everything squared away and address everybody's concerns.
Captain, how long has Captain Macedo been back at the FBI Academy in Washington, D.C.?
Unfortunately, he only got to be there for roughly about 3 weeks. It's a 3-month-long academy. 3 months, guys? Approximately 3 months. So he was back there attending that academy, and our boss passed away, and he came back to address that issue. So he could only be gone a maximum of 6 days, and then he gets expelled from the academy. So he's going to go back to handle that and then come back for our boss's funeral.
And the department has run, with his absence for 3 weeks, by the concerned efforts of your command staff. Is that correct?
Well, for his 3 weeks he was gone, our boss was still here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay, he only came back because of what happened.
Yeah. And the department will continue to run, whether or not we pick a sheriff, interim, or whatever.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, we have an excellent administrative staff. We have an excellent department. Everybody knows their jobs, and we can take care of any issues that evolve.
So it sounds like this is a 90-day, class or schooling, or?
Yeah, it's roughly 3 months altogether.
All right.
It's very prestigious, and it's
Sure.
good for our department that he attends
What
that.
course is it, Captain?
It's the FBI Academy, Leadership Academy.
Leadership course.
Yes.
And the selection process to attend that is quite extensive.
He's been trying for 6 years.
I have to go back to my position where we should extend it more than 2 weeks, and at least have the ability to have all the people that we need to talk to here. I think another 45 to 90 days might suffice that purpose.
Let's see what Captain Valley wants.
I'm going to speak for myself, but I think I'm speaking for the majority of our department. We just lost our boss last Thursday, and I don't think any of us have any problem with you guys taking time to, consider the issue and give us, number one, time to grieve and get used to the way things are without our boss being here. So I wouldn't have any objections. I don't think my fellow captain would have any objections, and I don't think my fellow administrators would have any objection if you put this off for a little bit.
Thank you, Captain.
Thank you.
Okay.
Rick Usillo, DSA President, and I concur with what Mr. Ballard just said. Captain Ballard.
Thank you, Rick.
Judy Hawkins, I'm the HR Director. I think if you would like HR to assist in talking with potential candidates for the position, it would be a better process if we had a little bit more time. And then definitely to be able to talk to Captain Macedo, we would have to wait for his return to be able to fully sit down and discuss the matter with him. All right.
I love it when decisions are made for us. That's great. All right, so I concur with what Mike says.
Sounds good to me.
So how many days? What's the extension?
Just tell the
Well, it
captain.
sounds like 90 days, so we're
90
looking
days?
at first of the year.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that concurrence?
Yeah, I concur.
Yes.
Based on what Captain Ballard said, yeah.
And I just want to clarify with the board, if in this succession of command, is the board wanting staff and HR to reach out to all of them? Or is there the top 3, 4, down to the deputy sergeant? Would you like for staff to reach out to everyone.
Not at this time.
I
Why
think
are we
we should
waiting?
table it until that 90-day period.
No, I know, but I was under the impression that you were wanting information back.
Well, from Macedo, I think,
In-
and Captain
at-
Ballard, just those two, right? I mean,
Not, well, you know, I think we should give it some time.
I'm not indicating that we would go out tomorrow. I'm just wanting direction in 90 days, when we come back to the board.
What are we gonna talk about?
Yes, yes, at 90 days, I'm assuming that you would like information from staff in 90 days. So what I'm trying to solicit is information from you, if you would like HR and staff to just speak to the top two, or the top four, or the top five, to get information, to present that information to you in 90 days. And in that 90 days, staff would be able to reach out to those people, whomever you would like them to solicit information. So we're in a position in 90 days to give you substantive information.
I would like to talk about it in 90 days.
I would prefer, I think you're right, I think we should go ahead with, you know, at least getting an idea. And you could ask them, if you wanted to wait a little bit, ask them in 2 months, you know. But before the 90 days comes up, at least talk to the top two, Captain Macedo and Captain Ballard.
That's all I was looking for, was top two.
Bob, Board, may I make a suggestion? We're going to have 90 days. I would recommend that, per the policy, the positions listed in the policy, if there's a desire to those folks that are holding that position, contact HR indicating their desire. That way we'll have an idea who would be interested in the position. And then at the end of our 90 days, we'll at least know who's interested. And that would give the opportunity for Captain Macedo, Captain Ballard, I'm sorry, Lieutenant Hubbardie, Lieutenant Strom, and Lieutenant Chris, sorry, Chris, to at least have a chance to, and you need to understand, folks, losing your boss when you're a cop is tough. And these guys do their job every day. Let them grieve, then go back to work.
90 days, so we're looking at February? Well, I can tell you firsthand, 90 days is not enough time to grieve, but I'll be okay with it.
All right. So, you want to clarify it for everybody?
What I heard was that in 90 days, we would bring it back to the board, and that in that 90 days, staff would reach out to the top two, and any of the other listed titles in the policy would have the opportunity to reach out to HR themselves. And then any information that we get in that 90 days would be presented to the board then.
Not quite what I heard.
Okay, then,
So, what I thought Mike said was that whoever wishes to reach out to HR can do that so that in 90 days we can have a report out on that.
In the command.
that's what I said. Anybody in the SO's office, or the titles in the,
The people holding positions listed on that policy.
right, that's what I was meaning.
Yes, but they would contact HR.
Okay.
I apologize, folks.
Okay? Good. So we're, what's that? Okay, so we're gonna take a lunch break.
Who's buying this time?
You as always. But you're buying for all those folks, you're buying for all those folks out there.
here, because we can't be.
What's the break over, Cliff?
What time will you be back?
Be back at 1:35.